Imagine you are a single pregnant woman living in a country where you are highly condemned for it. To help you, a married but wealthy man enters into a fake contract with you, which leads to a long and beautiful journey together. The story begins with our protagonist having a dream where she is part of an animation. Yundu is walking, and suddenly two rabbits jump into her lap. At that moment, she wakes up from her nap confused, and we see that the woman is being made up. Learning a little more about our protagonist, she is a very good speaker who is on her way to first place in an academy. Her classes are always full of students, however, the man currently in first place always looks for something to tarnish his opponent's image, and it all starts with some malicious rumors about her. Although it is generally known about the character of the number one, when the institution's director passes by a room and sees the protagonist putting the man in his place, the gentleman reprimands her for her attitude. However, after he calls her to his office, he excuses himself saying he did it just to avoid hurting the number one's ego and delivers the news that soon Yundu will be occupying his position. However, the gentleman carries a concern. He wants to know if the protagonist is not interested in getting married and starting a family before taking on a bigger responsibility. With that said, the woman becomes thoughtful about the subject, and then she receives a message from her boyfriend saying he will be waiting for her at a hotel. Now we move to a doctor who works in the field of gynecology and obstetrics. He is a good doctor, so much so that every time the man approaches a certain baby he delivered, the child stops crying and calms down. After his consultations, Taekyung goes to meet his girlfriend at a cafe, and there he is surprised when she proposes to him. It was already clear in their relationship that the man doesn't believe in marriage. He doesn't think it's right to tie himself to someone and be obliged to stay by that person's side for the rest of his life. However, Taekyung explains that he likes her and their relationship, he just doesn't think it's necessary to label it with a ring. However, things start to go wrong when his girlfriend doesn't accept the answer she received, and because she is a public figure, soon people start filming what is happening. After this meeting, the man goes to the hotel where he is staying, and on the way, he starts receiving calls from his girlfriend apologizing, saying she will never bring up the subject again. Returning to the protagonist, she is also in the same hotel. The message from her boyfriend earlier told Yundu to meet him in a room. When the woman enters the room, she is impressed as soon as she sees a box with a ring inside and then with what is on the bed. However, as the protagonist starts noticing some details, like the piece of clothing bought not being her size and neither is the ring, Yundu realizes that he was actually expecting another woman. Of course, a fight between the two happens and results in the protagonist going down to the parking lot furious. There are two identical vehicles in the place, one belongs to her boyfriend and the other to Taekyung. Knowing that Yundu will certainly take out her frustration on a car, we see the protagonist taking a red pen from her purse and then scribbling on one of the vehicles. Meanwhile, the doctor was almost going up when he decided to return to his car. At the same time he was talking to his girlfriend on the phone and came across the vehicle all marked up. Since Yundu was no longer near him, Taekyung didn't even accuse her of the damage, but things get worse by the second because his girlfriend ended up going to the hotel and saw the accusations written on the hood of the vehicle. And to make matters worse, the guests in the parking lot filmed the celebrity discovering a supposed betrayal, which we know was mistakenly accused, but the woman didn't want any more explanations and began to believe that the reason he didn't want to marry was because he had someone else. In the next scene, we see the protagonist's brother and mother in a car. She will also have expenses because unfortunately, the boy ends up crashing the vehicle his sister had lent him. And the worst part was that it was the taxi that took Yundu from the hotel to home. Now let's meet the family members who live in the same residence. We have the protagonist's mother, her uncle, her brother, and her niece, whom her brother had when he was still a teenager. In the next scene, we see that Taekyung is determined to find out who damaged his car, so he takes the memory card from the vehicle's camera and comes across the protagonist, who is a complete stranger to him. The next day we follow a gathering of women for tea and relaxation. The head of an important family, Madam Moon, is present, and the tea time is ruined when another furious woman joins them, but she is there to talk to the lady. It turns out this woman is the mother of Taekyung's ex-girlfriend, and she wants to punish the family for the shame her daughter went through being rejected in public and the confusion about the scribbles on the vehicle. Se-jin, who is Madam Moon's family secretary, even tries to calm things down, but she ends up falling when pushed by the furious woman, resulting in some things breaking and her cutting her hand. The drama in Taekyung's family is even greater when we discover that his step-grandmother is not much of a fan of his and always finds something to blame him for or treat him poorly. The boy's mother had him in another marriage and raised him mostly alone until she met Taekyung's stepfather, but as her partner's family always made sure to point out who is blood-related, her son never felt comfortable in their presence. Later we see what the awkward meeting resulted in, as Taekyung was called to the family home to have a conversation with his grandmother. And it didn't take long for a fight to start. As always, the lady made sure to insult Taekyung's mother and her past. Soon the man left, but before that, he asked his mother not to blame herself, as this type of behavior says much more about them than it does about her. The only one who seems to be spared from this family is Taekyung's stepfather. Giving a brief summary about Taekyung's colleague, we meet Dr. Cha, who is also his brother-in-law, as he married the boy's sister, but it seems the couple is going through problems since they decided to divorce in secret. At night, while the family is having dinner, Madam Moon comments that she has a plan to get Taekyung married, and the next day, we see that she calls her grandson to arrange a meeting between them. Meanwhile, the protagonist received a voice message from her ex-boyfriend, in which the man says that everything is over with the mistress. Thus, Yeondu decided to go to the hotel to return the ring that was meant for the other woman and end their relationship once and for all. Continuing with Taekyung, his meeting was also at the hotel, and there was not his grandmother but the family secretary. Confused about what is happening, Se-jin explains that Madam Moon wants the two of them to get married. But as we saw before that he is against marriage, the man promptly refuses. And as soon as the conversation ends, Taekyung receives a call from security informing him that the woman who scratched his car is back in the parking lot. At the same time this drama unfolds, we see who is the second woman of the protagonist's ex-boyfriend, and it turns out to be the secretary Se-jin. Despite the audio she received, the protagonist discovers that they are still together when she sees them kissing inside the secretary's vehicle. And speaking more about this couple, the man wanted Se-jin to go with him to another country, however, she explains her desire to join the Gong family, and now that the opportunity has arisen, the woman will take advantage of it. Yeondu is truly shaken by what she just witnessed, so when Taekyung finds her and starts talking about what she did to his car, the woman doesn't even pay attention and soon faints. The doctor takes her to the hospital, and there's something surprising is revealed to both of them. Everything is fine with the protagonist. It turns out that since she may have been exposed to extreme stress while pregnant, it resulted in her fainting. Yeondu wasn't expecting this news, much less that it involves twins. Later, Taekyung returned to his life, and when he took the car for repairs, he realized that the protagonist's phone was left in his vehicle. Meanwhile, Madam Moon called the secretary to her house and told her to do whatever it takes to get her grandson married. The lady shares her fear that one day Taekyung might want to participate in the family's fortune, and she believes that making the man build his own will prevent that. Returning to Taekyung, the protagonist's phone keeps receiving calls, and thinking it might be the owner, the man answers, but it turns out to be her ex-boyfriend saying he will pay for the car repair because he hurt her, and in just a few seconds, the doctor realized that Junha was not a good person. Now the next call was from Yeondu, and the two arranged for her to pick up the device at the clinic where he works. So, the next day, when the protagonist is there, she asks to speak with Taekyung, and in his office, Yeondu explains her situation, leading the conversation to the point that she doesn't want these babies or to continue the pregnancy. However, as Taekyung specializes in fertility, he says he doesn't do that type of work and advises her to seek Dr. Cha. As soon as she arrives home and sees her mother scolding her brother, warning him not to have another child before getting married, Yeondu feels even more uncomfortable about revealing her pregnancy. But good things are also happening in our protagonist's life, as she received a call from a competing academy saying they are interested in hiring her as the head instructor, something that makes her family very happy when they find out. Focusing a bit more on Yeondu's mother, we see that the world is indeed small, as the lady is finishing her studies to enter college, and coincidentally, her professor is Sejin's father, the Gong family's secretary. Later, we see that both the gentleman and Sejin's mother were invited to Madamoon's 80th birthday party, and although the couple no longer has a great fortune, it seems that the woman's mother continues to act as if she is part of the elite. While the party is happening, Dr. Cha tries to convince Taekyung to come down before everything ends, just so his grandmother won't bother him later, and we see it wasn't an easy task. But Taekyung was right not to want to go because as soon as he appeared in the hall, his grandmother set him up, as the lady announced to everyone that her grandson was going to get married, even though she knew the man was against it. And as expected, Madamoon treats him very well in front of strangers. I confess I'm already fed up with this lady. What saved Taekyung from leaving the party was a patient who went into labor, so the man and Dr. Cha had to leave. However, since the mother was being treated by Dr. Cha, Taekyung had to keep an eye on the couple's other daughter, as all the nurses were called to assist with the birth, and it is that baby who stops crying when she sees the man, the one we saw at the beginning of the story. Meanwhile, the protagonist met with the director of the competing academy that wants to hire her to give her the offer, which is quite good. And as soon as the meeting ended, Yeondu rushed to the bathroom to throw up everything she had eaten so far. Now we're entering the phase of morning sickness. When she was leaving the place, the woman bumped into Taekyung, who begged her to help him with the issue of changing the diaper of the baby he is taking care of, and after doing that, the two sat on a bench in a square. Taekyung explains some things about the surgery Yeondu intends to have. She will need a responsible person present, and although the man has nothing to do with it, he advises her to go to the children's father and confront him with the pregnancy before Junha moves to another country. Now moving to a conversation between Sejin and her father, we see that the man is completely against this marriage because he knows his daughter's true intentions and what that family is like. Speaking of the dear ones, at night, Taekyung went to the house and once again stated his position against marriage, which resulted in his grandmother mistreating him once again, and thus, Taekyung decided to cut ties with everyone. The next day, Yeondu decided to listen to Taekyung's advice and went to her ex-boyfriend to talk. In their meeting, Junha said once again that he was going abroad, and when the protagonist hypothetically talks about being pregnant, the man comments that if it were true, he would ask her to terminate it. Thus, Yeondu doesn't think much. She leaves the place and goes to Taekyung's clinic, where, in an act of desperation, at the reception, the protagonist shouts that she wants to terminate the babies right then and there, and we see how shaken she is. However, before anything else, Taekyung convinces her to have an ultrasound, and while performing the exam, the man says that it seems one of the babies didn't make it. Surprisingly, Yeondu is shaken by the news and decides to leave the place as soon as possible. Now moving to the Gong family house, Madamoon ordered the servants to remove Taekyung's belongings from the residence because the lady decided that since he cut ties with everyone, the man should take his belongings too. This confusion results in Taekyung's mother deciding to do something she should have done long ago, escape from this horrible family. And as everyone is very nervous about the situation, the secretary takes on the responsibility of finding the woman. Meanwhile, Yeondu doesn't have a moment's peace. When she is going to her classroom at the academy, the protagonist stops in front of the bulletin board to see what is making her students excited, and at that moment, the woman comes across a photo of her ultrasound. As soon as people leave and return to their lives, we discover who did this. It was the number one in the place. He threatens Yeondu, saying that if she doesn't leave the academy, he will tell everyone who owns those babies, who, besides having a child out of wedlock, also wanted to terminate them. And as we know that in this country these situations are not well regarded, Yeondu cannot afford to confront him. Unfortunately, the man found out after her slip at the clinic, which his wife also frequents. Later, the protagonist decides to go drinking to drown out the confusion in her head, and there, she helps a lady who didn't have cash to pay for what she consumed, as the establishment only accepted that form of payment. When Yeondu goes to get her wallet, she drops the ultrasound photo, and at that moment, Taekyung's mother, who is about to leave, decides to stay a little longer and keep company with this woman she just met. In fact, she can't drink, but she does so to prevent the protagonist from drinking alcohol while pregnant. Soon the lady comments about knowing her secret, so Yeondu, who doesn't have many people to confide in, talks about what happened recently with her. And In-OK tries to give another perspective on having one baby left. The lady comments that he might be trying to survive, just like the protagonist, and if she gives him a chance, the baby can teach her many things. In-OK also shared a bit about her story, which was not easy as a single mother, but having Taekyung made her move forward many times when she thought there was no way out. The woman knows that the way he feels today about the family is her fault for not setting limits on those who hurt him, but now, In-OK doesn't know what to do. Soon after, the lady is not feeling well, so she steps out of the tent for a moment while Yeondu waits inside. While feeling chills outside, Sejin finds her and then calls to inform Taekyung. As soon as the man appears, he gives the key to his room to the secretary to take his mother and then goes in search of her suitcase. Once again, fate crossed the man and the protagonist, but now Taekyung yells at Yeondu and blames her for making his mother drink. The two continue to argue, and in the end, after he insults her, the protagonist kicks the doctor's shin and leaves. After Taekyung arrives in his room and observes that although unconscious, his mother is fine, he invites Sejin for a conversation. The man thanks the secretary for spending the day looking for In-OK, and Sejin comments that her offer to have a fake marriage, just to please Madam Moon, is still on the table, especially since she is infertile and thus unable to continue Taekyung's lineage. Meanwhile, Dr. Cha celebrates with his wife their wedding anniversary. Even though the couple has already divorced, they continue with the celebration because Ji Myung still wants to keep this part a secret. However, after the guests leave, the ex-couple ends up drinking a lot, and at the end of the night, they end up in the same bed, which is a surprise both to us and to them the next day. Returning to the protagonist, she receives a call before going to sleep, and it is from the director of the competing academy. He just wanted to inform her that he can no longer offer the position to Yeondu because a rumor about her being pregnant was published on the student forum. And now, our dear protagonist's life is increasingly falling apart. Moving to Taekyung, the next day his father visits him in the office, and after many years of suffering at the hands of that family, the man acknowledges his mistakes and apologizes for everything Taekyung went through. Chansik tells his son that although Sejin is a decent person, he shouldn't accept the marriage if it's not his desire, and he will find a way to deal with Madam Moon. However, he asks Taekyung to convince his mother to return home as well. Meanwhile, at the protagonist's house, her niece Sujayam was once again using Yeondu's computer without her aunt knowing, when she came across a page accusing her of being pregnant. Because the words were different, the child didn't fully understand what it meant, but her father and uncle did. Soon, Yeondu's mother arrived home, and the three made sure she didn't find out, so they asked her to stay in the kitchen preparing dinner while they went out for a bit. In the next scene, we see that our protagonist was called to the academy to collect her things, and afterward, she had a meeting in the director's office with him and the number one. Mr. Park shouted at Yeondu many times, as if her being pregnant was the worst crime in the world, saying he would charge her for the damages caused to the institution since several parents were asking for refunds. The breaking point was when the number one suggested that the protagonist kneel to apologize. At that moment, Yeondu exploded and let out all the anguish she was feeling, saying she would expose the number one for invading her privacy and revealing something extremely personal. However, as it was a woman talking to two completely prejudiced men, the threats didn't have much effect. As soon as the protagonist opened the office door to leave, she was met with another surprise. What wasn't confirmed for her brother, uncle, and niece was now undeniable, as they heard the entire discussion. The family went to a small park to talk, and while Yeondu and her brother argued, their uncle and Soo-jaeom just watched the two. The protagonist's brother lectured her for being careless, especially since when he was younger and arrived with Soo-jaeom as a baby, Yeondu had tried to send her away. The boy just wants his sister to tell their mother before the lady finds out some other way, and what bothers him most is that despite all the mistakes he made in life, Yeondu was seen as the family's salvation for always following the rules and being the responsible one. In the next scene, we see Sejin's family drama unfold. Sejin's mother thought the marriage was almost certain, and, known for accumulating debts, she took out 3 large loans, believing it was a good idea to match the wealth of the Gong family. However, she panicked when she found out her daughter would no longer receive the money Madam Moon had given her, especially when Sejin said she could no longer bear the situation of selling herself to that family just to pay off her mother's never-ending debts. Thus, Sejin declared she would not marry, and at that moment, her mother slapped her across the face, which was unexpected. Continuing, Sejin's mother commented that Sejin was her only hope and that she needed to marry to restore the family's financial situation. Switching to Taekyung's family, Chonsik asked his son to attend a family lunch with his mother to celebrate his brother's pregnancy. As soon as the doctor arrived with In-OK, Madam Moon made her presence felt by telling them to leave, but as promised, Chonsik began to stand up to her, asking them to stay. With Madam Moon's gaze upon her, In-OK ended up spilling a drink on her clothes, and when she and her son stepped away from the table for a few minutes, Chonsik took the opportunity to say that if the family continued treating his son and wife this way, he would leave with them. This is Madam Moon's greatest fear, so she said things would improve if Chonsik promised never to give Taekyung a position in the family business, as the possibility of Taekyung having a right to the family business also frightened her. As it was the only way to appease her, Chonsik agreed. However, everything fell apart when mother and son returned to the table, and In-OK announced she would file for divorce. As they left the place, Taekyung's mother told him she made this decision because she couldn't live without her son. It was fine for her not to be the wife of a wealthy president or even lose a leg, but she couldn't bear to live without the one who gave her so many reasons to move forward. Meanwhile, the protagonist met Sejin because In-OK had asked her secretary to find a gift for the woman who had such a pleasant conversation the other day. In summary, Yeondu didn't accept the gift, and as Sejin had to leave for an emergency, she left a card with the protagonist for future contact. In the next scene, we encounter something funny as the doctor is heading to the parking lot and bumps into Junha, although Taekyung doesn't know who he is. The point is that both are wearing the same outfit, and when they reach their vehicles, as we already know, the cars are also the same model. Coincidentally, the place Taekyung was heading to is the same event the protagonist is attending, which is organized to support single mothers. But since the two had argued the last time they saw each other, they didn't even talk. Later, during a break between advice sessions for the mothers, the doctor stopped to look at the events pamphlet and realized that the man from the elevator earlier was one of the sponsors, who coincidentally has the same name as Yeondu's ex-boyfriend. Soon Taekyung realized it must be him and saved the protagonist just in time, because when she also realized who one of the sponsors was, she decided to leave. But who was near the exit? Junha. Not knowing what to do, like an angel, the doctor pulled her aside and helped her hide. As a thank you, Yeondu decided to take Taekyung skating, a place she uses as an escape when she's having stressful days, and there they had fun. Later, while eating, the protagonist talked to the doctor about being confused about the baby. However, she was now leaning more towards continuing with the pregnancy than terminating it. Taekyung advised her to make a decision only after thinking deeply about it and, regardless of her choice, once made, Yeondu shouldn't look back or blame herself. Meanwhile, Sejin's father finally took a good stance and went to talk to his old friend Chonsik. The man mentioned that he thought it was a good idea to call off the wedding, considering that the Gong family was going through a tough time. Later, when Se-jin found out what her father did, it led to an argument between them, and we learned that she lied about being infertile to Taekyung after exposing this to her father. However, the issue of this marriage was not over yet, because to appease things between her mother and the Gong family, Taekyung made a difficult decision to go to Madam Moon and apologize, along with a declaration promising to do whatever she wanted from now on. Meanwhile, Yeondu finally told her mother about her pregnancy, and since the protagonist decided to keep the child, her mother responded by slapping her. Taekyung also made a decision regarding his problem, which was to accept Se-jin's proposal for a superficial marriage, but as viewers, we know the woman wasn't honest about everything with him. Returning to the protagonist, the situation worsened at her residence because, since she maintained the idea of having the child, Bang Nim decided to kick her out. The next morning, Se-jin's family was invited to a meal with the Gong family to discuss the wedding. Madam Moon's clever gifts had already begun to arrive, as seen when she gave Se-jin's parents a contract to purchase an apartment, which the couple would now live in, and it's even better than where they currently reside. Meanwhile, the protagonist's life is getting worse. Besides her car being towed, her mother and brother found her ex-boyfriend and are now going to talk to him about the child. However, Yeondu asked for Taekyung's help, who was staying at the same hotel, and the doctor managed to distract them by saying that the room they were causing a commotion in front of was actually his and not Junha's. But as soon as they left, our dear doctor fainted because he was extremely weak, as if he were ill. Luckily, the protagonist was nearby, observing the whole commotion, and was able to help him by taking him back to his room. Yeondu spent the night there, but when Se-jin appeared in Taekyung's room the next day and the protagonist was in the bathroom, Se-jin told the doctor that she was the one who took care of him and even hid the card Yeondu had written thanking him for his help in her pocket. Then Se-jin asked Taekyung to go ahead to the parking lot, and when she returned to the room, furious to confront the woman who had been there, whom she didn't even know, the secretary found no one there. However, life always reveals the truth sooner or later, which is why we must always choose our words carefully. When Taekyung returned to the room, he found a button belonging to the protagonist's clothing under the bed. Thinking it was his fiancée's, he went to a store to buy a new piece as a thank you for Se-jin supposedly taking care of him. However, at the store, the doctor ran into Yeondu, who was there to replace the lost button. At that moment, he realized Se-jin had lied to him, especially since the protagonist was beginning to show the same symptoms as Taekyung. Thus, the doctor took Yeondu out for lunch, and after the meal, while he was paying the bill and the protagonist went to the bathroom, she overheard something shocking. Yeondu had seen Se-jin's face in the room earlier, but the secretary didn't know who the woman with Taekyung was. On her way back from the bathroom, the protagonist saw Se-jin angrily talking to her mother on the phone, and because the secretary was speaking loudly, Yeondu heard that Se-jin planned to continue lying to Taekyung about her infertility. She intended to bind him with children after they married so that he couldn't leave her. Shocked, the protagonist was about to return when she found Taekyung behind her, meaning he heard everything too. However, Yeondu didn't let him act in anger at that moment, so she took him to the parking lot, and there they said their goodbyes. Turning our attention back to the Gong family drama, during a discussion between Ji Myung and Dr. Cha, we discovered that he accused her of terminating the pregnancy, which is why their marriage is so strained. The next day, Se-jin's father called Taekyung for a conversation at the school, where he thanked the doctor for forgiving his daughter's lie about infertility, as that is what Se-jin told her father. Now, Taekyung had no more doubts about her character, she was truly deceitful. Fortunately, the doctor was in the right place at the right time, as the protagonist's mother choked during a meal with her colleagues, and Taekyung was able to help her recover. Later in the infirmary, he even offered some support to the lady, who seemed quite shaken for reasons many didn't know, but he secretly did. After Taekyung had left, the protagonist went to the school for a job interview. Despite being honest about her situation, Sejin's father didn't mind the circumstances and was about to hire her when Yeondu's mother entered the room. Initially, Bangnim pretended not to know her, and after she left, the protagonist told the man that, unfortunately, she couldn't accept the position. Thus, Yeondu quickly left to find her mother, who was surprised by the end of her daughter's brilliant career, as she was not yet aware that the protagonist had been fired from the academy. Contrary to what I thought, Bangnim wasn't moved to finally leave her daughter in peace. Instead, she paid for a taxi to take them to a clinic to remove the child from Yeondu's womb. At that moment, I was simply horrified. It's very sad to see the protagonist crying and begging her mother to stand by her and accept her with the child. I don't understand how the lady stood by young Dongwook and not her daughter, who supported her for so long. Now we turn to Taekyung, who unexpectedly appeared at his fiancée's dress fitting. After asking to be alone with her, we see him reveal that he knows everything and ends their marriage. This, of course, makes Sejin lose her composure. That night, it's shown that the protagonist returned home, and I must eat my words because her mother is beginning to relent. The lady appeared in the middle of the night to ease the woman's fever with a compress and said they should go together the next day to see the doctor to check on the child. Returning to the Gong family, some things are about to change since the result for Chun Myong's wife revealed she is not pregnant as everyone thought. Moving on to his sister, we see Ji Myung take a pregnancy test just for peace of mind, which turns out positive. However, given her secret divorce from her husband, how will their relationship fare? The protagonist's mother ended up not going with her to see the doctor because she found another commitment. Bangnim went with her son to meet Junha, and when they saw him, the two gave the guy a beating. However, after things calmed down, the pair ended up falling for Junha's insistence that the child in Yeondu's womb wasn't his. As he was leaving, Junha overheard the mother and son commenting that they were going to the obstetric clinic to meet the protagonist. Arriving there first, the man cornered her to find out the truth about the pregnancy. Since Junha expressed that he wanted Taekyung to remove the child from Yeondu's womb, the doctor thought it was a good idea to pretend to be the baby's father so that the man would leave her alone. But the plan backfired because Bangnim ended up entering the room at that moment, and now the confusion is set. In summary, Junha left saying he would sue the protagonist's family, and her mother was left in poor health due to the shock of having another man involved, especially now that she thinks her daughter was involved with several men. Now, what will the doctor and Yeondu do to fix all this madness? Everything is getting more complicated because instead of the protagonist telling the truth to her family when she got home, she continues the lie, using the excuse that she can't marry the doctor because he's a stranger, which, in a way, is true, given that they've only known each other for a short time. And Yeondu's life seems like it won't have a moment of peace, especially now that she and the doctor told that lie to her ex-boyfriend. The man starts calling the protagonist repeatedly, more upset by the fact that she cheated on him with another man than by the pregnancy itself. In this case, it's clear that Junha's reaction is more about his ego, as he had previously expressed what he wanted Yeondu to do with the child, if it were his. But things aren't easy for Taekyung either. He thought he had finally solved his problem, which was the marriage to Sejin. However, when he got home, he discovered that the construction for the couple's future home was still ongoing. When the doctor went to speak with his grandmother, he found the secretary putting on a show, pretending to be extremely upset after supposedly finding a note from another woman among Taekyung's things. The note was the one Yeondu had written when she had taken care of him. Later, the two go together to the house being renovated, where Sejin reveals her true intentions, which revolve around securing an opportunity to join the family. As we've already seen, she will stop at nothing to achieve this. Meanwhile, Ji Myung goes to the nearest store and buys all the pregnancy tests she can find. She wants to confirm whether the first test was a false positive. However, with the confirmation from these new tests, there's no doubt that a child is on the way. The next day, Chun Myung and his wife, who thought they were expecting a baby, decided to take a break from trying to conceive an heir, which, of course, disappoints Madam Moon. Now focusing on Taekyung, we see a situation that had happened before between him and Sejin. The boy had given her a necklace, and on another day, when he was preparing a surprise with a rose, Taekyung found her on the roof, about to throw the necklace away. Sejin was about to move soon, but that wasn't the topic of conversation between them. Suddenly, the girl started asking how much Taekyung liked her. After receiving positive answers, Sejin seemed to take pleasure in humiliating him. She commented that just as his family despised him, she felt the same way. She had decided to take advantage of his vulnerability to get closer to him, allowing her to access this world of wealthy people and bring her family closer to that status as well. At the end of this conversation, Taekyung simply threw the necklace on the ground and walked away. In the next scene, we see the doctor arriving at his office, where he encounters Yeondu's mother. Bongnim brought up the subject of marriage with Taekyung. Since the doctor had no intention of marrying the protagonist, starting with the fact that he wasn't the father of the child and that he was already promised to someone else, he explained that he wouldn't get involved so deeply. This, of course, angered the woman, who promptly left. Immediately afterward, the doctor called Yeondu. They needed to resolve the lie they had created, so they decided to meet up. On the way to the meeting place, right in front of the clinic, Junha was waiting for Taekyung to come out, and a physical fight broke out between the two men. In the end, both were taken to the police station. The protagonist was called to the station, and when she arrived, naturally, she was more concerned about the doctor who had been helping her than about Junha, which once again hurt the man's ego. Junha once again pressed her, asking who the baby's father really was. At this point, with the situation having escalated to the extreme, Yeondu told the truth. She explained that only one child remained, and the one that had been lost was his, ending as he had wished. But the child that remained belonged solely to her. In response, Junha made a completely unnecessary comment, which led to him receiving a slap from the protagonist, who added that he should never speak ill of her child again. After they left, Taekyung and Yeondu sat on a bench in a park to talk. The two came to the conclusion that they had both been there for each other during the most difficult moments of their lives. Just as the doctor had helped her a lot, the protagonist wanted to return the favor. At that moment, Taekyung had the brilliant idea of asking Yeondu to marry him. That way, they would both solve their problems. The man would get rid of Sejin and enter a relationship, while the woman would have a father figure for her child, or at least an uncle, and a situation that would put her family at ease. However, Yeondu didn't think it was a good idea, even if it was just a marriage for appearances, and soon after, they said their goodbyes. The next day, we see the arrival of Yumayung in Korea. She is the doctor's younger sister. Meanwhile, Junha finally made a significant discovery. Until now, he hadn't connected Taekyung with the family name that Sejin had mentioned she would be joining. At that moment, he realized the connection, which, of course, frustrated him even more. To him, Taekyung had stolen both his girlfriend and his lover. Thus, Junha went to the family's company looking for the secretary, but he didn't expect Sejin not to show up. Instead, she sent security to remove him from the premises. During the commotion, Ji Myung happened to pass by Junha and became suspicious when she heard him shouting Sejin's name. When Chonsik's daughter entered the office, she encountered Sejin's request to her father, which was about her transferring to the finance department. Naturally, Ji Myung found this a bit strange, and to change the subject, she mentioned the man in the lobby yelling for the secretary. Sejin quickly went down to reprimand the security guards for not handling the situation discreetly. When she called Junha, she realized that he had left his phone behind. Meanwhile, the protagonist, who was at home, received a call from her mother's friends, concerned about why she had missed school, which was also a surprise to Yeondu, as that had never happened before. Now, we turn to Bongnim, who was once again meddling in her daughter's life. Since Taekyung had refused to marry the protagonist, the woman decided to take the matter to his parents. Knowing more or less where the family lived, Bangnim went from door to door ringing doorbells until she found them. At the protagonist's house, she became curious about where her mother might be. After finding out from her brother, Yeon-do decided to go to the residence to try to mitigate the damage. Meanwhile, Taekyung appeared at the gate alone. As he calmed Bangnim down, he explained that he had proposed marriage to the protagonist, but she had refused. With that said, when Yeon-do arrived at the house, there was no one in front of it anymore. To her surprise, Taekyung's mother appeared just as she was about to ring the doorbell. Recognizing the protagonist, the woman offered her driver to take her back home. Luckily, Yeon-do didn't have to give any explanation for being there, but as soon as she got home, she found Taekyung at the house. Meanwhile, a storm was brewing in the Gong family. In one of the gifts that the young Yoo Myung was distributing, a photo that was stuck in her bag accidentally got included. The photo revealed a pregnancy test, which, of course, made Madam Eun lose her mind. Now, Yoo Myung's life will certainly never be the same. The lady swore she would keep the girl locked up from now on, stripping her of all her freedom, even taking her phone. Back to Taekyung, he had a great time at Yeon-do's family home and, for once, felt welcomed in a place. But that didn't last long, because when they found out he had an arranged marriage, Dong-wook kicked him out, thinking Taekyung might be toying with everyone's feelings. The next day, Yeon-do was surprised by some gifts that the doctor's mother had sent to her house, baby items. As a gesture of gratitude, the protagonist agreed to have lunch with the lady. During the meal, Taekyung showed up with Sejin, and an awkward atmosphere lingered the entire time Yeon-do was there, so it didn't take long for her to leave. On her way out, the secretary handed her an invitation to the wedding, which was to take place the next day. Focusing a bit on Yoo Myung, the girl managed to escape from her room and went to her boyfriend's house. When she arrived, she thought she would be introduced to his parents as his girlfriend and nothing more. However, his entire family was present, and during the meal, her boyfriend proposed to her. This made Yoo Myung nervous, so she used the excuse of needing to go to the bathroom to escape. But the boy caught her as she was leaving, and now the two had a conversation that marked the end of their relationship. Yoo Myung explained that he knew she didn't want to get married or have children. Her proposal was that they should stay as boyfriend and girlfriend forever. But the boy wanted to get married and have a family, so since they couldn't reach an agreement, the only option they found was to break up. As a side note, during the conversation, Yoo Myung mentioned that she didn't want to die in childbirth like her mother did, confirming my suspicion that In-ok was only Taekyung's biological mother. Continuing, Yoo Myung didn't have money to return home, so she was dropped off near a place where Dong-wook worked. The girl caused a bit of a headache for the protagonist's brother, as Yoo Myung drank and couldn't pay. Moreover, she started seeing her ex-boyfriend's face in Dong-wook's and even ended up kissing him. Later, we see the protagonist at home, and she finally mustered the courage to tell the truth to her family, which, of course, left her mother devastated. The next day, the woman left before anyone woke up, leaving only a letter saying not to look for her. Focusing on the wedding, several other themes were addressed before the ceremony. For instance, Ji Myung's pregnancy was revealed to Dr. Cha through a colleague who called to congratulate him. It turns out that since the woman didn't want to take the blood test at her ex-husband's clinic, she went to another one. However, Ji Myung didn't know the owner was an acquaintance of Hyun-woo. Nevertheless, the man decided it wasn't the right time to bring up the subject with his ex-wife. A commotion caused by Junha also erupted at the entrance. Without an invitation, the security guards wouldn't let him in. So, Junha waited for a guest to show up on the street so he could borrow an invitation, and the chosen one was Sejin's father. The man didn't know who Junha was to the secretary, but Junha explained that he needed to speak with her urgently because he couldn't let Sejin marry someone who had gotten another woman pregnant. Since Jang Ho didn't want to ruin his daughter's big day, he didn't hand over his invitation. However, Junha forcibly took it from him and even pushed the man to get inside, causing Jang Ho to hit his head on the ground. The man was left unconscious, and just before Se-jin walked down the aisle, she received a call informing her that Jang Ho had been found passed out. Instead of going to attend to her father, the secretary decided to proceed with the wedding. Thinking nothing could ruin her plan, the protagonist showed up to prove that not everything can be controlled. Fulfilling Taekyung's earlier request, Yeondu shouted that he couldn't get married because she was pregnant with his baby, and the two quickly left the venue. Meanwhile, Se-jin's father woke up in the hospital surrounded by some students, and since he desperately wanted to return to his daughter, they took him back to the wedding venue. Back at the chaos that ensued there, Se-jin's mother even fought with and blamed In-ok for what had happened. At the same time, Bong-nim was shocked to see Taekyung arrive at the police station with Yeondu. The man apologized for all the harm caused to his future mother-in-law and promised that he would now commit to the protagonist. Soon, everyone went to Bong-nim's house, where they received a surprise visit from Taekyung's mother. In-ok invited the new couple for a private conversation, where they had to put on a show to convince her that they were truly in love and wanted to build a family together. Meanwhile, Ji Myung received a call from Dr. Cha asking her to come to the clinic. When she arrived, the woman discovered that her ex-husband already knew about the baby she was carrying. Since he had been drinking, Hyun-woo couldn't have a proper conversation with Ji Myung. In the end, she revealed that she had decided to terminate the pregnancy, which is why she hadn't told him yet and might never have. The next day, Se-jin went to the protagonist's house to talk about what she had done at the wedding. As expected, the secretary asked Yeondu to give up on everything. She even offered a large sum of money and promised to take care of the baby after it was born, as Madam Moon had asked Se-jin to register the marriage despite the scandal. However, the protagonist refused to believe the words of a liar like Se-jin and said she was willing to face Taekyung's grandmother. Thus, the two went together to the Gong family's residence. As expected, Madam Moon maintained her decision that Taekyung should stay with Se-jin. The lady didn't take long to kick the protagonist out of the house. Even though In-ok defended her, Madam Moon did not change her mind. As a result, Yeondu decided to kneel outside the house until Madam Moon agreed to at least talk to her. However, the protagonist couldn't remain in that position for long, as Se-jin's mother soon appeared and started a physical altercation with Yeondu. The woman only let go of the protagonist's hair when Taekyung appeared and, pretending to faint, gave him an excuse to get her out of that family's clutches. Given the circumstances, the doctor took Yeondu for some tests just to make sure the baby was still okay. When the two heard the heartbeat on the ultrasound, they became emotional. Despite all the chaos, Madam Moon eventually agreed to hold a family meeting to meet Yeondu's side of the family. But just when the two thought they might finally have some peace, Se-jin arrived with the lady at the meeting. However, the commotion didn't last long, as for the first time, In-ok and Chonsik expelled Madam Moon and Se-jin, siding with Taekyung's wishes. Soon, the protagonist's family found out that the doctor wasn't related to the lady by blood, which made a lot of sense to them, given how Madam Moon treated him. Seeing how much Taekyung was loved by Bong-nim, In-ok felt at peace with her son's decision and committed to fighting to protect him from Madam Moon. In the next scene, we see when the protagonist arrives home with her mother, and as good gossips, Yeondu's brother, along with her uncle, tell Bong-nim that they had already seen Se-jin before and about the proposal the woman had made to the protagonist, which leaves Bong-nim shocked at the secretary's audacity. And when the scene changes, we see Taekyung telling his mother about Se-jin's lie about being sterile, and once again, we see another person surprised at how malicious this secretary can be. However, on In-ok's side, she will have to be strong to protect her son's family, because when she got home and went to talk to Madam Moon, we see that the lady threw a pillow at Taekyung's mother. Meanwhile, the man was called to take a walk with Chonsik, who took him to Se-jin's house. The gentleman just wanted Taekyung to apologize to the family of the woman he humiliated at the altar. However, at that moment, everyone could see another side of Se-jin, as she simply freaked out, saying she wouldn't let the man ruin their relationship, and it took her father saying it was over for her to go to her room. Chonsik took this action so that Taekyung could move forward with the marriage to the protagonist and also to calm his wife's heart a little. The next day, the mothers of the couple met because In-ok had the idea of the two living in the newlywed annex at the family mansion. She believes Madam Un will back down a bit, and despite being anxious, Bang Nim agrees it might be a good idea, especially after both learn about Se-jin's other lies and how cunning this woman is. Later, the two go to the registry office to look for the couple, as the day before, they had mentioned they would register the marriage just to reassure them, which would obviously be a farce, but now with both there, they will have to find another way out. So, the two start a fake fight so that the two ladies get distracted and can get out of this situation, which works for now. Meanwhile, Se-jin's mother went to Madam Un's house again, and there, the lady made another scene, demanding that the family pay her more money or give her a bigger apartment to compensate for the shame her daughter went through because of Taekyung. And Se-jin had to drag her out of the place, which was very embarrassing, and now she risks not even having Madam Un on her side anymore. Back to the main couple, the mothers brought the two together and made them apologize to each other. Afterward, the ladies dropped the marriage registration story but asked that they at least move to the family annex, and since they would have to find a place to pretend they were living together, even knowing the burden it would be to deal with Madam Un, the two agreed. Later, we see when In-ok breaks the news about the couple moving to the annex to Madam Un, and as expected, the lady already started her drama by saying she wouldn't eat anymore as a protest, so to go along with her, In-ok said she would do the same. Now the rest of the family is starting to blame Yeondu and Taekyung for Madam Un's tantrum, so the lady's grandchildren decided they should convince the protagonist not to move to the annex, thus arranging to meet Yeondu at an establishment. Meanwhile, Se-jin packs her belongings at the company into a box and leaves a resignation letter on Chonsik's desk. Now back to the protagonist, we see that she answered all the questions asked of her very well, but even so, Taekyung's family managed to twist every word that came out of Yeondu's mouth. Luckily, the man arrived shortly to save her from this interrogation, so the meeting didn't last much longer. And the next day, when Taekyung went to pick up the protagonist and her things for her to move to the annex, we see that everyone in her family had red eyes because it was a difficult night, and they cried a lot at her farewell. Now Madam Un has started eating again and seems more comfortable with the new couple's arrival at the residence. However, when Yeondu is brought to the lady, we see that she simply freaked out and started throwing salt at the protagonist. But the protagonist didn't fall for Madam Un's game, and even all dirty, she remained calm and just asked In-ok not to argue with the lady. After all, it's good news for the couple when they heard Madam Un say that they couldn't enter that house without being invited. Taekyung presents some rules to Yeondu as soon as she settles in the annex, and on the first day, we can already see that they will maintain an individual life when others aren't watching. For example, each will wash their own dishes and they will sleep in separate rooms. The next day, we see Se-jin's mother getting involved in another mess. She met with the guys she owes money to and arranged that as soon as the remaining money from the apartment her daughter received is transferred, she will pass everything to them to reduce her debt. Meanwhile, Chonsik called Se-jin to the company, and since he still has affection for her for being his employee for many years, the man offered her a position in the company in the United States, and Se-jin said she would get back to him. Back to the protagonist, in the main house, the women have already started preparations for the death anniversary of the family's grandfather, Madam Un's ex-husband. Acting smart, when left alone, Soo-jong took her tasks to Yeondu to do, even though the couple wasn't invited to participate. At the same time, Yumayong received a message from her ex-boyfriend Jae, saying he was returning to the United States and would send her things back as soon as he arrived. At that moment, Nostalgia hit the girl for her past relationship, so she went to the airport to see if she could find him, but she arrived too late, so Yu Myung accepted that this was the end of the couple and just replied that he could throw her things away. While typing on her phone, the girl bumped into Junha, and speaking of him, before boarding, the man sent a message to Yeondu saying he was leaving the country. But since her phone was near the meddlesome Soo-jong, the woman ended up reading the message and threatened Yeondu to tell the rest of the family. So at this moment, the protagonist had to make a scene so the woman wouldn't ruin her and Taekyung's plan. Well, in the end, the work Yeondu did was highly praised by Madam Moon. However, the lady didn't know who really prepared it because Soo-jong lied, saying she did everything herself. And the little viper doesn't stop there. She tricked Yeondu into getting ready for the tea ceremony, so Yeondu showed up at Madam Moon's house just when her friends were there talking about what happened at the wedding, and as we know, chaos ensued. In-ok was very disappointed with Soo-jong when she found out what she did, and even so, the blame fell on Yeondu. The next day, Ji Myung was supposed to have surgery to remove the baby, and at the last second, Hyunwoo decided to go to the hospital where she was having the procedure to try to stop her. However, at the location, Dr. Cha was surprised to find his ex-wife outside the recovery room, and she told him she didn't have the courage to go through with the procedure. Now the couple doesn't know how to proceed with their relationship, as having the child is something they share in common, as well as continuing with the divorce, but neither wants the baby to grow up without a mother or father. Meanwhile, after Soo-jong and Chun Myung convinced Madam Moon that Yeondu should be punished by preparing the food for the grandfather's death anniversary, we see the protagonist giving her best in the kitchen. Later, we suddenly see Taekyung arriving angrily and taking Yeondu out of the place. He argues with her for getting involved with his family again, as the day before, he had made it clear for her to ignore them, so there wouldn't be more fights between them or plans from others to make Madam Moon blame them for something. Their argument didn't last long because Taekyung knows very well how meddlesome his family is, and to resolve Yeondu's issue, he offered to cook the protagonist's part himself. Of course, Madam Moon was bothered by this, but when Chonsik arrived, he decided that since Taekyung was involved in preparing the food for the death anniversary, he should also attend the ceremony. And now, my friends, I think the lady might have a heart attack because the last thing she wanted was for Taekyung to participate as a member of the Gong family. Seeing Taekyung with the others made Madam Moon start crying, but Chonsik stood firm in his decision, and later, he thanked Taekyung for participating and promised to be more persistent in making his mother change her mind. Meanwhile, Yeondu was returning to the annex when she overheard Hyunwoo and Ji Myung arguing about the divorce. As the protagonist's phone buzzed at that moment, they realized she must have heard something, so they asked Yeondu to keep her mouth shut. And now we have a nickname for the baby, which will be real. I just hope that's not his actual name. The next day, two men showed up at Jang Ho's school to present the contract his wife offered in place of the debt, but it turns out the duo wants more money. Jang Ho promised to pay them if they returned the contract. However, since they didn't, he grabbed the paper from their hands and tore it up. At that moment, the men became furious and started breaking things in the place, but the ladies who are Jang Ho's students wouldn't let these thuggish-looking men hurt the school director. Leading a group, Bang Nim appeared in the room with her colleagues, holding brooms or anything that could be used to scare them away. Meanwhile, Yeondu and Taekyung were on their way to meet Chonsik at the family company when they ran into Sejin in the elevator. Once again, the woman made malicious comments intending to affect them, but Taekyung didn't let it slide and took her outside. There, he made it clear to Sejin to know her place and that the little guilt he felt for what he did to her was diminishing with her actions. Later, before Taekyung and Yeondu met with Chonsik, Sejin entered the office first and accepted the position the gentleman had offered. She also lied once again, saying that Taekyung raised his voice while they were in the elevator and laughed with his wife just to upset her. But it seems this time Chonsik didn't fall for Sejin's tales, and during lunch with Taekyung and his daughter-in-law, he only asked them to be kind until Sejin left. The gentleman also mentioned that whatever Yeondu wants, he will pay to ensure his first grandchild is comfortable. Now moving to Dongwook, once again Yoo Myung appeared at his workplace, commenting on how he resembles her ex. So, in case the girl is interested, the man makes it clear that he has a daughter and doesn't want to get involved at the moment. But since Yoo Myung seemed not to believe him, Dongwook pretended to call the police to accuse her of stalking, and thus, the girl left. In the next scene, we see that the day has come to finalize Dr. Cha's divorce from his wife, and since the man didn't show up to sign the papers, Ji Myung called to find out where he was. However, it was his sister-in-law who answered, alone in Hyunwoo's office. She was there waiting for him to return to discuss his health after losing the baby, and at this moment, Soo-jong is another person who learned one of the couple's secrets. And it didn't remain a secret for long, as the woman went straight to tell Madam Eun and In-ok, then her husband was the next to know. Since Soo-jong asked them not to let Ji Myung know she was the one who told, I'm sure this blame will fall on the protagonist. Meanwhile, Ji Myung went to the clinic to find out why Hyunwoo didn't show up to sign the papers, and at that moment, the man makes her a proposal, that they not go down this path for now. Dr. Cha believes they can have a co-parenting relationship with the child without being involved as a couple, so both would be single to pursue other relationships but continue as good, present, and active parents in the baby's life. But if the pair concludes it won't work, Hyunwoo says they can revisit the idea of divorce later. And Ji Myung ends up agreeing with this idea because they were then called to the family house, and when they arrived, it was an intervention about their divorce. To escape this mess, the woman decided to come clean, saying they weren't getting divorced but rather having a baby. And of course, everyone was happy with the news, except for Soo-jong and her husband, who were hoping for the couple's disaster so they could be the future heirs of the family company. After everything calmed down, Ji Myung went to the protagonist, as I had predicted, and started accusing her of telling everyone. The woman was a bit cruel with her words, even saying that Yeondu was an unwelcome guest in the family house, and since Ji Myung wanted to be like that, the protagonist decided to take the blame. However, Taekyung was arriving at that moment and heard everything. He didn't stay quiet and immediately asked his sister to apologize because even he didn't know about the incident, and since Yeondu wasn't one to talk about others' lives, Ji Myung should retract everything she said. Since the woman couldn't do that, Hyunwoo apologized to the couple and took her away. Later, we see that Taekyung took the protagonist to a surprise that her family had prepared for her birthday, and this was a moment of peace for Yeondu amid so much confusion. Meanwhile, Sejin was at Madam Eun's house, and she received money from the lady, which was the remaining amount for the apartment. When it was time to leave, instead of leaving, she decided to go to the annex since she still had the key, and there, rummaging through Yeondu's things, Sejin found a task list indicating that the protagonist would be living alone in 3 months. Knowing the two could return at any moment, Sejin left a pair of her earrings in a closet and then hid in another part of the house because when she was heading to the door, the couple arrived. As a birthday gift, Taekyung gave Yeondu an accessory that she and the baby could use together. And as soon as she had the chance, Sejin left the residence without being seen. In the next scene, we see that Taekyung is increasingly being included in the protagonist's family, as the members have now added him to a social network chat group, which does not include Yeondu since, according to her mother, she doesn't like her phone constantly buzzing. Meanwhile, the protagonist was raiding the Gong family's fridge. Her pregnancy hunger was so intense that Yeondu couldn't hold back. As she woke up in the middle of the night, she was startled to find the woman in the dark. But it doesn't stop there. As always, Madam Eun criticized Yeondu for eating the food she made for her biological grandchildren, which resulted in the protagonist ending up on the floor, all dirty, as the container holding the food was knocked over during the commotion. Although everyone was awakened by this uproar, Madam Eun's grandchildren couldn't side with her, and the lady began to feel she was losing her power to control the family. Back at the annex, Yeondu ended up with a hurt calf due to the fall, and as she continued to have pregnancy cravings, Taekyung went out in the middle of the night to get a good amount of food for her. The next day, we see Ji Myung going to the clinic with her ex-husband, and there, when Dr. Cha performed an ultrasound on her, they both got emotional. Later, while having coffee together, the nurse mentioned that Soo-jong had been at the clinic the other day, and that's when Hyun-woo realized who might have spread the news about the divorce to the family. Thus, he arranged with his ex-wife to apologize once more to Yeon-do for blaming her. Later, we see Se-jin going to the annex again, but now with the excuse that she must have left a pair of earrings there while arranging it for her to live in. And as if it wasn't enough for Yeon-do to let the woman in to search, Se-jin also asked for a cup of tea. During the conversation, Se-jin was the same snake as always, insinuating that things weren't over between her and Taekyung. She also expressed jealousy over the way In-ok treated Yeon-do, especially after hearing the lady invite her to dinner the next day to celebrate the protagonist's belated birthday. Se-jin tried her best to extract information from Yeon-do, but as always, the protagonist only said what was necessary, and soon the snake left. As soon as Taekyung arrives, he notices Yeon-do is downcast, so to please her, he tried to prepare a meal for her. However, since he isn't used to cooking, the food wasn't very edible. This led to the protagonist, already intrigued by what Se-jin had said, arguing with the doctor for the mess he made in the kitchen that had just been cleaned, causing Taekyung to drop everything he was doing, close his face, and go drink alone. Later, we see Hyun-woo going to the annex to apologize to Yeon-do again, and since she was alone, the man decided to call Taekyung. At that moment, as Taekyung was drunk, he ended up saying more than he should have, and the protagonist overheard, meaning things will get worse than they already were. Even so, Dr. Cha tried to calm her down, and as soon as he left the residence, he ran into Taekyung in the yard, giving him the opportunity to advise the man to apologize and treat his wife better. The next day, Dong-wook has a job interview, and to his surprise, while waiting at a cafe, Yoo Myung appeared. To stop the man from calling her a stalker, the girl showed him a photo of her ex-boyfriend, and now Dong-wook realized they really do look alike. Later, we see him in his interview, but knowing there's someone identical to him walking around the world made Dong-wook's mind wander, which hindered him a bit when answering questions. And later, it is shown how small the world really is, as the woman who interviewed Dong-wook is a friend of Yoo Myung, and the girl was there to meet her at the cafe after the candidates finished. In the next scene, we see a bit before the protagonist's birthday dinner. First, we go through Madam Moon's drama, who pretends to be sick to avoid participating, and then we move on to a conversation between Chon-sik and his beloved, where he mentions trying to call Se-jin. Since she didn't answer, the man believes she is already on the plane, which is good for both families. But in the end, Madam Moon ended up eating at the table with the family because In-ok went to see her after hearing loud music coming from her room and found her crying. Now with everyone at the table, Chon-sik and his beloved present the protagonist with a beautiful pair of rings for the new couple in the family to wear. And as we know, every time there's a good moment in a drama, disaster soon follows. Her name is Se-jin, who showed up at the house just to ruin the celebration and announce that she is no longer going to the United States. The woman even put on a drama, saying she made this decision because her parents are about to divorce, and she even shed fake tears, which led to her and Madam Moon having a private conversation. Se-jin convinced the lady that in 3 months the protagonist would leave Taekyung and that the woman was plotting something against him. So, with Madam Moon's blessing, Se-jin promised to make everything go back to normal, starting with her returning as the family's secretary. This obviously made In-ok anxious thinking about the protagonist and Taekyung, so she asked her husband to do something, especially after all the lies and actions Se-jin took. In-ok told Chon-sik a bit without going into detail, but hopefully, it's enough for him to see the snake that the woman is. Later, while they were at the annex and Taekyung went to shower, the man's phone started buzzing non-stop, and it was at this moment that the protagonist discovered he was in a chat room with his family. Yundu quickly went to her room and called her mother because her brother started crossing the line by asking Taekyung to get him a job, and she asked the lady to remove everyone from the group but not to tell the doctor anything. Meanwhile, Se-jin went too far with her parents. As soon as the woman returned home, she made a proposal to her mother. If the lady divorced her father, Se-jin would give her the money to pay off the debt, but if she chose to stay with the man, Se-jin would withdraw from her life. As soon as the woman finished speaking, Jang Ho couldn't contain himself and slapped his daughter's face, worsening the situation. Subsequently, Se-jin went to the couple's room and started taking her father's clothes out of the wardrobe, asking him to leave, thus clearing her path to pursue and reclaim her place in the Gong family. Even though Jang Ho tried to explain to her that if Se-jin gave more money to her mother, the lady would incur more debts, the woman didn't want to listen and only blamed him for the family's current situation. It seems the mother will follow in Se-jin's footsteps because after the woman went to her room, the lady went to her to make sure Se-jin would really give her the money if she got a divorce. The next day, Ji Myung is surprised to encounter an old acquaintance in the company's elevator. His name is Sang-hoon, and when the man discovers she is still married, as the couple hasn't announced it, he seems saddened by the news. Shortly after, the woman learns that Sang-hoon will be the new senior manager of the sales team. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Se-jin and her mother went there under the pretense that the lady needed to undergo some tests due to the onset of menopause, and they also took the opportunity to apologize for their recent actions. For the first time in a while, Se-jin seemed to be starting to change, but I don't believe her act, and I hope Taekyung doesn't either. Later, we see the doctor heading to the opening of the protagonist's family's restaurant, and on the way, he helped some ladies find the place as they were lost. Since they didn't know who Taekyung was, they started gossiping among themselves that Bang Nim doesn't seem to like her son-in-law much, as she never bragged about him. That said, when everyone arrived at the location and discovered that the doctor is Bang Nim's son-in-law, they were shocked and asked him not to tell the protagonist's mother. The opening was a success and full of customers, but the funny part was that Taekyung made an effort to win over his mother-in-law. He offered to work in her place and did so much that he was exhausted by the end. After the restaurant closed, Bang Nim thanked her son-in-law for his help, and it was then that he learned that everyone left the chat room at the protagonist's request, not because they were angry with him, as he had thought. It was good for Taekyung to clear things up, allowing him to realize he is very much loved by this family. Later, when Taekyung got home, he discovered from the driver that the protagonist had gone out. The scene then cuts to Yundu at a restaurant. She decides to leave after her mother tells her about the doctor's efforts throughout the afternoon at the opening. As she steps outside, she encounters the top figure from the institution where she used to lecture. The man is as rude as ever and belittles Yundu, even speaking ill of the baby, but the woman doesn't let it slide and responds to him. The man only stops putting her down when Taekyung appears, and at that moment, the doctor was the best of all. Taekyung handed over his business card and told the man to contact him if he ever thought of speaking to his wife again, as from now on, he shouldn't even get close to the protagonist. Since the man despises single mothers so much, he should know that the doctor's mother was one, and yet Taekyung turned out much better than this lecturer. The next day, Madam Moon insists on the idea that Se-jin should be rehired as a secretary, and to avoid further controversy, she decides to confront Yundu, questioning whether everyone is against the idea because of her. Well, the protagonist doesn't let the lady intimidate her and explains that although she hasn't expressed any opinion on the matter, Yundu doesn't feel comfortable having Se-jin around. At this point, Chonsik tells his mother that the best thing she can do is back off. Meanwhile, Se-jin's mother followed her daughter's plan and brought Jang Ho his clothes along with the divorce papers. Since all this happened at the school, Bang Nim overheard it by chance and was shocked by the news, but it explains why the man has been so downcast in recent days. In the next scene, we see the protagonist talking to Jang Ho about accepting the offer to work at his school. However, When Yeondu steps out to take a call from her mother, she ends up feeling unwell and faints. Fortunately, the man was nearby to help her, but as Se-jin arrived at the establishment at that moment, the snake asked her father to help put the protagonist in her car instead of calling an ambulance, promising to take her to the hospital. I was even surprised to see that Se-jin actually did as she promised Jang-ho. However, I was soon disappointed again because the woman called Taekyung and told a completely different story. Se-jin claimed that she prevented Yeondu from getting hurt and saved her life, repeating the same story when the protagonist woke up, taking advantage of Yeondu not remembering what happened. Back to Jang-ho, Chonsik was at the man's school to have a conversation with him, and during it, Jang-ho discovered Se-jin's plan about his divorce and the drama his daughter is creating for the Gong family. But to avoid disrupting her plans, the man remains silent about the truth. Later, we see Jang-ho in the school infirmary, and with Bong Nim's help, he applied medicine to his back to help with the pain from the fall he suffered while helping Yeondu. At that moment, Se-jin called to say that everything was fine with the protagonist, but she didn't expect to be confronted by her father, who said he had discovered her plan. As the woman is blinded by her desire to get what she wants, Se-jin told the man to proceed with the divorce because he had lost the title of father to her. Back at the hospital, Se-jin further exploited her role as a heroine by pretending to have shoulder pain. Thus, Madam Moon, who went there with In-ok, asked Taekyung to take the woman back, and since she supposedly saved his wife, the man agreed. However, upon arriving at Se-jin's residence, her mother dragged him into dinner, and I don't know why the man stayed instead of leaving. Meanwhile, Yeondu decided to tell Madam Moon that it's okay for Se-jin to return as the secretary, and now everything is starting to go according to the woman's plan. However, since things are going well for Se-jin, In-ok decided that everything should be resolved for her son as well, so she arranged for the new couple to start having meals with the Gong family. The next day, we see Se-jin talking to Madam Moon when Soo-jong suddenly enters. Do you remember when Taekyung's sister-in-law was at the annex and saw those messages from Jun-ha on the protagonist's phone? Well, it took her a while to speak up, but that day has come, and now everything Se-jin and the lady wanted was being served on a silver platter for them. Thus, since Se-jin couldn't extract anything from Yeondu, later Madam Moon called the protagonist for a conversation. And being quick-witted, Yeondu understood what it was about and was very open about the matter, even handing over her phone for the lady to take a look. But things get interesting at the dinner table when Madam Moon throws some indirect comments at the couple about marrying a woman who has another man's baby. As expected, Yeondu doesn't let it slide. She joins in the ladies' game and even questions Soo-jong in front of everyone if she had mentioned the messages she received the other day from her ex-boyfriend. The next day, one of the lies the couple had to tell to escape the traps Madam Moon set for them spread through the clinic. It turns out Yeondu said that Taekyung has that syndrome where the man feels the same things as the pregnant woman, like becoming more emotional and nauseous. Thus, when Se-jin took her mother for a consultation with Dr. Cha, she invited Taekyung for a meal, and as he was very hungry from having to pretend at home that he had no appetite, he ended up accepting. Meanwhile, Bong Nim went to the Gong family home at In-ok's invitation, and there, while alone with Madam Moon, she realized the lady couldn't read. But to prevent Bong Nim from telling others about this, Madam Moon lunged at Bong Nim and silenced her. This was a surprise when Yeondu and In-ok arrived at the room and witnessed the scene. However, the ladies agreed to ask to be left alone, and Madam Moon even wanted to pay Bong Nim not to reveal her secret to others so she wouldn't be humiliated. But at this moment, we realize where Yeondu got her manners from, as Bong Nim refused any payment and said it wasn't something to be ashamed of. In the next scene, we see Bong Nim getting to know the annex, and at this moment, the protagonist takes advantage of being alone with her to ask if it's okay for her to work at the school where her mother studies. However, the lady explains that she thinks it's better for her daughter to take advantage of this pregnancy period to rest, and in the end, Yeondu ends up agreeing. Now, we see the protagonist's uncle posting a notice on the restaurant door that they are hiring, and the man remembers when an unknown woman approached saying that his son will appear soon, and that Dae-sang should be kind to him. These words are haunting the man, as apparently he doesn't have any children in the world with his genes, so he decides to go to a fortune teller, and there, Dae-sang shares the scheduled time with Chun Myung and his wife. The couple went to the fortune teller to find out if they should side with Madam Un or In-ok. However, the woman ends up changing the focus to what Soo-jong most wanted to know, which was if they will get pregnant again. It comes to the woman that the child she sees is one that will have two fathers. Despite this, the couple is very happy. While Dae-sang doesn't receive any clear answer as he would like, since the fortune teller only tells him to continue cooking at the restaurant and his son will appear. After everyone leaves, the woman tells her assistant that the two men who were with Soo-jong would be the fathers of her baby, and now we'll have to keep watching to understand what she meant by that. The next day, Madam Un found out that the protagonist would spend the weekend at her mother's house with Taekyung, so to please her, fearing that Bangnim might have told about her secret, the lady asked Se-jin to take her there. Meanwhile, Ji Myung went to one of the stores where she's promoting a campaign to take photos of a living mannequin, as the model would like to see a real person wearing the clothes before trying them on. And there, she met Sang-hoon, who volunteered to be photographed. Later, the man asked Ji Myung to take a photo with him, and at that moment, Hyun-woo appears at the place seeming to be jealous. Well, he can't avoid this feeling, because when Dr. Cha asked the man if he's married, Sang-hoon said he's waiting for his first love to get divorced for that, meaning Ji Myung. That said, Hyun-woo chose not to keep the couple's pregnancy a secret anymore and told the man, which obviously frustrated his ex-wife, who until now hadn't said anything so that no one would treat her differently at the company. However, Dr. Cha's jealousy has a lot of foundation, as we discover that Sang-hoon declared himself to Ji Myung 2 weeks before her wedding to her ex-husband, because the woman kept her entire private life a secret, and now, a tense atmosphere between them is established. After all, the two had already agreed that they could go on with their single lives, even though Ji Myung made it clear that she doesn't feel any attraction to Sang-hoon. In the next scene, we see when Dae-sang goes to interview a person who is looking to fill the vacancy at the restaurant, and when the man meets the candidate, he realizes it's an ex-girlfriend of his. Woo-hee is a little embarrassed by this situation, but Dae-sang convinces her to accept the job by promising her double the salary that Bangnim had allowed, and one of the reasons he does this is thinking that Woo-hee might be involved with the much-anticipated arrival of the man's son. Meanwhile, the protagonist was in the car with Se-jin and talking about the gentleman who was accompanying her that day she fainted. Yeon-do commented that she's not able to contact him, so the woman tries to call Jang-ho once more, and when she enters her password to unlock the phone, Se-jin ends up memorizing the sequence. Soon Yeon-do gets out of the car upon spotting her niece playing in a square. However, unfortunately, the protagonist didn't notice that she ended up leaving her phone in the vehicle. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Se-jin blocks her father's number on Yeon-do's phone before she returns, and when she was trying to find out more things about the protagonist, the woman arrived at the car to retrieve her belongings without suspecting that the secretary might have done something. Moving on to Soo-jayam, Yeon-do arrived just in time when her niece was suffering unpleasant comments from other children just because she doesn't have a mother, and of course, the protagonist wouldn't let this go unscathed, so she bothers the other child so much that the little one even ends up leaving crying. Later, we see when the two are going home, and on the way, Soo-jayam asks her aunt not to tell her father anything, so that he doesn't worry or get upset about these things, and at this moment, Yeon-do begins to feel afraid that the same might happen to her child. At the same time, Madam Un was having a nightmare where everyone in the family discovered her secret, so she decided to get ready and go to Bangnim's house. After eating briefly with the family, Bangnim invited her to have a private conversation, and until now, Madam Un is behaving like she never had before. In exchange for continuing to keep the lady's secret, Bangnim asked her for some favors, and although we don't have access to all of them, most involved her daughter, and soon, Madam Un leaves. Now, Bong Nim has prepared a bed for the protagonist to sleep with her husband. However, neither of them feels comfortable with this, so Yeondu chooses to take a walk in a square when she realizes she won't be able to avoid it. While she's there, Soo-jaeum tells Taekyung what happened earlier with her, and again the girl asks that the story doesn't reach her father. However, later we see that Dong-wook ended up overhearing a part when he went to call her to sleep and addressing the subject lightly. The man made it clear to his daughter to always tell him when something like this happens, because he will always be there to console her and help her with it. In the next scene, we see Taekyung walking the streets looking for the protagonist, and when the man finds her, she's sitting on a swing very shaken. Now it's starting to sink in for her, because when Yeondu is left alone to raise this child, it won't be easy at all, and not just for herself, but for everyone in the family who are starting to get attached to Taekyung. So, the protagonist tells the man everything she's thinking, and at this moment, before he has a reaction or a solution to this problem, Dae-sang, who was passing by the place, questions the two if Taekyung wouldn't be the father of the baby, because that's what the uncle heard. After Taekyung confirmed that what Dae-sang was asking was true, the two were surprised when the protagonist's uncle approached and hugged the doctor, because the man understood that even though the baby isn't his, Taekyung will raise it as his son for loving Yeondu. The doctor didn't even have time to explain himself, and Dae-sang already took him for a drink. However, only the uncle ended up ingesting alcohol, and after being a little looser, the man advised the couple to never tell the truth to both families, not even to the baby, because this will be a reason for many unnecessary arguments. The next day, we see that one of Bong Nim's requests to Madam Moon was for the lady to attend school on Sunday. Taking advantage of it being empty, suddenly Bong Nim could convince her to start studying. However, when we move to the meeting of the two, this idea doesn't seem to have worked out very well. Later, we see that the electricity went out in the Gong family's house, and to check if the same is happening in the annex, In-ok and Soo-jong go to the residence. There, the doctor's sister-in-law ends up encountering a pillow and blanket in what was supposed to be an office in the house, which opens up room for her to start suspecting that something is happening between Taekyung and Yeondu that the rest don't know about. Meanwhile, Dong-wook and Yoo-myung set up a date. The girl wanted to see him to give him a new cell phone. It happens that in one of those times when their paths crossed, the man's phone ended up falling and cracking the screen, so to compensate him, Yoo-myung called him to meet. At first, the man didn't accept the gift, but before he could return it, Yoo-myung left and even said that if they meet again, Dong-wook will date her. At the same time, the protagonist and Taekyung have fun at the arcade, then the two even take photos in a booth. And moving on to when they're in a cafeteria, we see the doctor make another proposal to Yeondu. He felt sorry for seeing her crying the night before, so Taekyung asks if they can't be friends, so when the baby is born, the doctor will help her with whatever he can. And as she now finds herself very alone, the protagonist accepts, especially since things will get much more difficult when their separation happens for the rest of the family. However, upon returning home, the duo discovers that they will become more intimate than they imagined, since now that the annex is without electricity, the two will have to stay a few days in the main house, meaning they can no longer sleep in separate rooms. The next day, we see Chon-sik return from his trip, and it was so good that they even changed the actor who plays the character, so friends, now we'll have to get used to this new face. And from his trip, Chon-sik brought a new partner to work with the company, and guess who it is? We're talking about Junha. Meanwhile, we see that Dae-sang went to Taekyung's clinic to ask the man never to let his niece discover the truth about the doctor not being Real's father. Discovering this left him thoughtful and distressed, so Dae-sang needed to make sure that Yeondu wouldn't be left alone. At the same time, a conversation between Ji-myung and Sang-hoon takes place. It happens that after the man found out she's pregnant, he started acting differently towards her, so Ji-myung followed him to the parking lot, and there's some revelations happened that are a door for us to make assumptions. Sang-hoon says he's disappointed with Ji-myung being pregnant. For him, that woman passionate about work and who didn't like married life is no longer the same one by his side, and that after a certain incident, he believed Ji-myung would separate. Now the question remains, did the two get involved in the past? Well, we don't know yet, but Hyun-woo ended up seeing them together inside the man's car, and Dr. Cha didn't think this was very normal, so much so that he even sent a message to his ex-wife saying he could no longer pick her up. Moving on to Jang-ho's school, we see the gentleman talking to his daughter, and he tells Se-jin to make a choice. Jang-ho is willing to leave his job that he likes so much to go to a more renowned company to please Se-jin and give the life that his daughter wants so much, but for that, she couldn't go ahead with her plan and her parents' divorce. As expected, the secretary chose to stick with her dreams of entering the Gong family, so Jang-ho made it clear that from now on, she would no longer be his daughter. Well, Se-jin apparently was a little shaken by these words and ended up walking in the rain to the clinic, so when Taekyung was going home, he spotted the secretary and invited her to talk at a convenience store while eating. During their conversation, a memory from the past came up, because when the two were younger, they ate a lot of these ready-made foods that are sold in these places. However, Taekyung remained distant the whole time they were at the place, and before leaving, he left an umbrella with Se-jin. Later, while getting ready to sleep, Yumayong ended up entering her room without knocking, because that's where the new couple is spending the nights, and at that moment, she caught Taekyung preparing his bed on the floor, so the suspicions that Soo-jong spread to the family that the two were fighting to the point of sleeping separately were confirmed. Thus, the protagonist and the doctor decided that from now on they would sleep in the same bed so that they don't leave more clues that they're not together. However, it may be too late, because In-ok finds out soon after about what Yumayong saw. So, the next day, In-ok schedules a yoga class for couples with the intention of bringing the two closer together, and in a way this works, because Taekyung started to have different feelings for the protagonist. And later, we see that Yeon-do got a temporary job to occupy her mind. The woman went back on her decision to stay at home enjoying her pregnancy, thinking that she needs to save money for the time when she will leave the Gong family and have to fend for herself. Meanwhile, Taekyung went to get a drink for himself, but as soon as he left his room, Se-jin arrived at the clinic and entered the room to wait for him to return. As the doctor had left his cell phone on his desk, when Yeon-do called, she got no answer, so she sent some messages to him talking about the new job and that maybe they will be able to break up the marriage earlier than they imagined. However, as it was Se-jin who was in the room and she's an intruder in other people's phones, the woman ended up reading the protagonist's messages. Then, Taekyung returns to the clinic, and when he entered his room, he didn't even imagine that the secretary had looked at his phone, so thinking of Se-jin as a friend, the man asked for a recommendation of a place for him to buy a cake for his wife who continues to have pregnancy cravings, and playing the beautiful lady, the secretary accompanied him. Later, we see Hyun-woo in his room. When his ex-wife goes out to take a shower, the man ends up answering her ringing cell phone, and it's Sang-hoon. Dr. Cha just answers and lets the man speak, so Sang-hoon apologizes for the things he had said the other day in the car to Ji Myung and comments that he thinks the woman should open up the truth to Hyun-woo. At this moment, of course, Dr. Cha couldn't contain himself and questions what the man is talking about. However, Sang-hoon is surprised to discover that it wasn't Ji Myung he was on the call with, and just says, before hanging up, that this is a matter that only the woman should explain to Hyun-woo. Meanwhile, the first signs that Taekyung is starting to fall in love with the protagonist began to emerge, as the man expresses not having liked at all that she had been working until late, and even more without giving him many explanations. The next day we see that Madam Moon gave in to the idea of attending school with Bang Nim, but the lady asked her to keep it a secret and pretend not to know her so that others wouldn't suspect anything during classes. However, everything went down the drain when the teacher entered the room, and as it's Jang-ho, he recognized her right away. The principal didn't tell about who Madam Moon is to her classmates, and showing to be very different from his daughter. When they were alone, Jang-ho said he was willing to teach her without the rest of her family finding out, which would be a way to repay for all the money that the Gong family invested in his school. Moving now to Yoo Myung, we see that she got that position in the company where Dong-wook had interviewed, and as it's a place where they hunt new talents to promote them, Soo Jae-im, who is killing it on social media, is one of the children selected to be advised. and the girl was passed as a challenge for Yumayong to conquer. Meanwhile, Sejin's mother signed the divorce papers with Mr. Jang Ho and then went to Taekyung's clinic to ask the man to stay by her daughter's side in this difficult moment of her life. However, when she was leaving, the lady heard that Taekyung would go to a bar to drink with Hyunwoo, but since Dr. Cha would only be free later, the man will stay at the establishment alone for a while. And passing this information to Sejin, we see that the secretary doesn't waste time and goes to the place. Later it's shown that Taekyung drank so much that he even passed out, so Sejin takes him home, which doesn't look good for him because she's considered the ex by In-ok. Anyway, Sejin helped Yeondu put Taekyung to bed and took advantage when she was alone in the room to take the protagonist's cell phone. Then after she left the couple alone in the room, the secretary took a look at Yeondu's messages and ended up finding among them the ones that Junha had written that day when Sujong was with the protagonist. Therefore, Sejin decided to take some photos to prove what she found to Madam Un. As soon as the protagonist leaves the room and sees her phone on the living room coffee table, Yeondu realizes that Sejin is up to something because she is sure she left the phone in the bedroom. The next day, we see that the current topic of conversation among the family members is how Taekyung is a womanizer, going out with his ex while his pregnant wife is at home. To prevent the comments from getting to her, Yeondu plays along with Madam Un's provocations and even asks the lady if she thinks divorce would be a good solution to this problem, which obviously leaves Madam Un shocked. Later, Sejin appears at the residence and gives a fake general apology to the women present. Then, we move to when she is alone with Madam Un, and we see that the secretary chose not to mention the messages she took photos of the previous night that were on the protagonist's phone. However, I believe that Sejin didn't open her mouth because she is planning something bigger than just telling Madam Un. Soon after, Sejin has a private conversation with Yeondu, just to keep up appearances and once again, falsely apologize. The protagonist takes advantage of their being alone to ask the secretary if she saw her phone the previous night, but maintaining her character, Sejin says she doesn't know about it. In the next scene, we see that Jang Ho managed to contact Yeondu through the school phone, and the man offered her something temporary, which is to be a tutor for a particular lady. Since the protagonist was feeling bad for not being able to contact Jang Ho before, she ended up accepting. However, Yeondu was thoughtful after hanging up because the gentleman mentioned he called her several times, but since she hadn't received any calls, the protagonist decided to check his contact in her phone book, and at that moment, she discovered that his number was blocked. Yeondu can't believe this could be Sejin's doing. It's a very malicious thing, but there's no other explanation because Taekyung didn't do it, and she, who owns the phone, didn't either. Switching to Chunmyeong, we see that he went to a place where a golf simulation is held, and there, the man ended up catching his father in the middle of a conversation with an assistant. The topic doesn't please Chunmyeong at all because Chonsik was talking about transferring company shares to Yeondu and Jimyeong's babies as a gift for the children. The man didn't waste time and, after arguing with his father, he rushed to call Madam Un and tell her everything. Meanwhile, Yeondu made a list of tests to see if the baby is still developing correctly, and fortunately, the baby is healthier than ever. But the couple's joy is interrupted when Madam Un called Hyunwoo and asked Dr. Cha to bring Taekyung home with him because there is a family crisis. Now we see Dae-sang, who is increasingly overwhelmed with problems because, in addition to promising Woo-hee double the salary, he recently agreed to her request to be paid weekly. While thinking about how to tell Bangnim, the restaurant owner, Yumayong appears at the place thinking Dae-sang is Soo-jaeum's father. The girl comments on the company's proposal to manage the girl, but since Dae-sang is older and doesn't understand much about this area, he thinks Yumayong wants to take advantage of the little girl's image and quickly expels her from the place. Soon Dong-wook arrives at the restaurant, and Dae-sang tells him about the girl who just left. Fearing, according to the men's minds, that Yumayong might find the little girl playing with friends in the square, Dong-wook quickly leaves the establishment to fetch his daughter. In any case, their fear turned out to be real because Yumayong found Soo Jaeum and, after defending her from her friends who were once again mistreating her just because she doesn't have a mother, Yumayong lightly mentioned her company and handed a business card to the girl. Back at the Gong family home, an argument is taking place. On one side, we have Madam Moon, who refuses to have any part of the company given to Taekyung or the children the man will have. Not being included among those who will receive the shares, Chun Myung obviously supports the lady. On the other side is Chon-sik, defending Taekyung and the family the doctor is building, reinforcing the idea that it's time for Taekyung to be accepted as a member of the Gong family, and this is a great way to show it to him. Of course, Madam Moon says she will not relent in opposing her son's decision, so she says more unpleasant things about Taekyung and Yeondu just as the couple is arriving. The man doesn't care that Madam Moon defames him, but it's different when it refers to his child. Thus, Taekyung confronts the lady, and what was supposed to be a conversation leading the family to behave differently ends at that moment due to both sides lacking respect. Taekyung can't take it anymore, it's visible in his eyes, and showing it, the man said he would take the whole company for himself, which almost gives the lady a heart attack. Chun Myung is another who can't hold back and goes after Taekyung, which once again shows that the only ones without sense in that house are those related to Madam Moon. In-ok is very upset with the situation that has formed and makes it clear to the lady that her attitude will never be forgiven. Later, while In-ok was trying to calm down by drinking tea, Yeondu appeared to inform her that Taekyung went to a hotel room for today. And the lady confesses to her daughter-in-law that for the first time, she is at peace regarding her son because, even though it's her fault the Gong family treats him the way they do, Taekyung has shown he is ready to become a family man. The next day, the intrigues don't end. During the meal, Madam Moon continues talking about Taekyung, so Yeondu, who couldn't hold back anymore, defended her husband, and even though she was respectful, of course, the lady didn't like it, unlike Yumayong, who fully supported her. In the next scene, we move to Madam Moon in her room with her youngest granddaughter, and there, Yumayong defends the young couple once again. However, at that moment, carried away by the heat of the moment, the lady reveals that soon the two will separate because she is helping Se-jin win over Taekyung. Thus, the girl decided to take the news to the protagonist because she likes the two together and doesn't agree with her grandmother's actions. Meanwhile, Chon-sik called his eldest son to his office and gave him the address of the hotel where the doctor is staying, so Chun Myung can fetch him. Obviously, the eldest son refuses to carry out such a task and, moreover, gives the address to Se-jin to go after him. Then we move to the scene where the secretary is in Taekyung's hotel room. Of course, the man refused to return to the annex, so Se-jin, thinking the doctor didn't know about Yeondu's ex-boyfriend, showed him the photos she had taken from the protagonist's phone, thinking she was triumphant. Taekyung quickly ruined her joy by saying he already knew about the matter and that it was resolved, but the problems didn't stop there because, shortly after, the doorbell rang, and it was Yeondu who was surprised to find Se-jin there. However, before anything was said, Yeondu asked to be alone with the secretary, and now, folks, things are about to heat up. The protagonist doesn't beat around the bush, she goes straight to the point and says she knows Se-jin hasn't given up on him. So, the secretary counters the issue, making it clear that she knows about the 3-month deadline, which once again reveals that she's been meddling in things that don't belong to her. Unfortunately, the man couldn't hear the entire conversation, but at least he got to hear the end. Se-jin concludes by saying that she truly loves him and if Yeondu doesn't feel the same, she should get out of the way as soon as possible. However, our protagonist retorts by saying that she loves him much more than the secretary does. After all, Se-jin is just obsessed with Taekyung, something that suffocates him and isn't healthy. Then, Yeondu tells Se-jin to leave her husband's room, and with no choice, the secretary storms off towards her car. Once inside the vehicle, Se-jin uses her last resort, which is to send a message to the number that had declared feelings to the protagonist, and that's when she realizes it's Junha. Meanwhile, After hearing Yeondu defend him, Taekyung had the courage to tell her that they should break the contract about the fake marriage. This obviously leaves our pregnant protagonist surprised, but what else can she do but accept? In the next scene, we see that Se-jin went to the Gong family company because she remembered that she had kept Junha's phone from when he tried to enter the building, and now she confirmed that Yeondu was dating the man after seeing several photos of them together. The next day, Madamoon decided to gather her supporters and went to the annex determined to kick the protagonist out of the residence. Since Yeondu already knows that everything between her and Taekyung is over, she simply responds that she will prepare her things within a few days. Meanwhile, Taekyung was thinking about the things he heard the previous night, so he arranged to meet Se-jin at a cafe to put an end to the strange friendship they had been maintaining. Of course, hearing that the pair would no longer meet to discuss private matters didn't please her, especially since the reason was that the man didn't want to make his wife uncomfortable, even though Yeondu never complained. Now that she is about to lose everything she thought she had gained in her relationship with Taekyung, Se-jin asks when the baby is due to compare it with the dates when Yeondu was still with Junha, and as expected, the secretary realizes that the child might not be Taekyung's. Switching to Yumayong, she was surprised to receive a call from Soo-jaeum inviting her to be her model, and after an afternoon together, the two go to the girls' family restaurant. However, Yumayong only drops her off in front of the place and then leaves because Soo-jaeum explains that her father is too angry right now to sign anything, so the woman should return on a day when he's calmer. Speaking of Dongwook, when the man went to make a delivery at a hotel in his mother's restaurant's name, he was surprised to encounter Taekyung in the corridors. The man immediately thought the doctor might be cheating on his sister, so Dongwook entered Taekyung's room looking for traces of a woman, and when he realized the doctor was telling the truth, that he would never betray Yeondu, the man even got emotional because he couldn't stand seeing someone else do the same thing Junha did to the protagonist. Meanwhile, Daesang once again shows he's overstepping boundaries. The man decided to rent out Yeondu's old room, even though Bangnim was against the idea, and guess who he signed the contract with? Jang Ho. So when the gentleman arrived home with Daesang, Bangnim almost kicked her relative out, but since the school director appeared to be sick, she relaxed for the night and let him stay. Returning to Yeondu, she went to the hotel to fetch her brother, but the man ended up taking a taxi home, and the protagonist stayed to talk with Taekyung. The two agreed on how to end the contract. They will tell both families that they want a divorce, but Taekyung will maintain an allowance to help her with the baby because, according to the doctor, this will prevent suspicion. Finally, before Yeondu leaves, she asks why he decided to end everything so quickly, and Taekyung surprises her by responding that it's because he's in love with someone else. The next day, before Ji-myung goes up to her office, Hyun-woo asks her in the company parking lot what happened between her and Sang-hoon. Ji-myung ends up getting nervous both because of the question and because they are making a fuss at the workplace, and instead of explaining to her husband what Sang-hoon was talking about in that call, Ji-myung simply comments that they are getting divorced and she doesn't owe him any more explanations. This is a surprise for Sang-hoon, who was behind a pillar listening to the whole argument, so I believe concerned for the woman he likes, the man went up to her office and said he would be there for Ji-myung when she needed, adding that he now knows the whole truth about her marriage, but he won't tell anyone. Meanwhile, we see Bangnim being attentive to Jang Ho, and the woman allows the gentleman to stay in her house until he finds another place. Switching to Hyun-woo, the man decided to take a walk to clear his head during lunch break and ended up meeting the son of a woman who has a pharmacy near the clinic. The boy was trying to ride a bicycle, and noticing his difficulty, Dr. Cha offered to teach him. However, they both forgot to inform the woman, so when she found them, she was trembling and very nervous because she thought the boy had been taken by someone or gotten lost. Anyway, after things calmed down, she thanked Hyun-woo for helping her little one with something she had difficulty teaching him. Returning to the protagonist, we see that the day she is going to teach Madamoon has finally arrived, and of course, the lady was extremely embarrassed when Jang Ho introduced them. Yeondu tried to convince her to learn Korean with her, but Madamoon was reluctant about the idea. Moving to the next scene, we see Taekyung in a cafe with the protagonist. He mentions that the first step before telling their families about the separation is to find a place for Yeondu to move to. The protagonist doesn't disagree with anything, she just thanks Taekyung for all the help he's given her and feels sad that they can't continue as friends. Meanwhile, at the Gong family house, In-ok discovers that the protagonist is moving out after overhearing Soo-jong talking to Chun Myung on the phone. She immediately calls to ask Yeondu not to do it. She mentions that she tried to contact her son to prevent him from meeting Chun Myung, but since she couldn't, she implores the protagonist to change her mind. Focusing on the men, we see that the reason Chun Myung arranged this private meeting with the doctor was to say he would take better care of In-ok and ask Taekyung to leave the family, including moving out of the house. The doctor is tired of all these intrigues, so he simply agrees to distance himself from everyone. But Taekyung didn't expect Yeondu's plan to be different, so after making him pack all his things in the hotel room, the protagonist and the man went to the Gong family house, where a huge argument was already taking place between In-ok and Madam Eun's grandchildren. There, our little Yeondu made her stance clear. She defended her man very well, put everyone in their place, and even said she wouldn't move out until everyone apologized to Taekyung. However, before the protagonist got more stressed, after all, she is pregnant, the doctor took her out of the place and, outside, declared his feelings for her, explaining that the woman he said he was in love with is actually Yeondu. Well, the protagonist is a bit confused about what to feel, and we quickly move to the next day. At breakfast, we see that Chonsik agreed with everything Yeondu had said, so he made each of his children, including his mother, apologize to Taekyung. And since the lady was reluctant about it, the protagonist gave a little threat by mentioning she found a new job, so to prevent her from revealing her secret, Madam Eun ended up apologizing. On a side note, at this point in the story, we can see that Yoo Myung isn't involved in any of these dramas and seems to be the only sibling acting normally. Later, when the young couple is back at the annex, Taekyung questions the protagonist about why she's avoiding him and even asks if she has no feelings for him. When Yeondu responds that she really doesn't feel anything, we see the man devastated. In the next scene, Yoo Myung meets with Soo Jaeum and Dae-sang at an establishment. The woman thought she was talking to the girl's father when she was surprised by Dong-wook's arrival. Updating the story, the family uncle is against Soo Jaeum signing a contract at such a young age, while her father sees no problem with it as long as everything is properly agreed upon. However, realizing who wants to manage his daughter, Dong-wook asks to speak with the woman alone. Well, seeing that the man really has a daughter made Yoo Myung lose all interest in him, and besides explaining what her company does, the woman shows willingness to assign another agent to take care of Soo Jaeum if he feels uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Yeondu once again causes headaches for the Gong family because upon seeing everyone taking advantage of In-ok in the kitchen, the protagonist tells each one to order their own food since today she decided her mother-in-law would have a day off with her. Chonsik loved the idea and fully supported his daughter-in-law, even commenting that it was about time someone put everyone in their place. When Taekyung heard about the two going out, he didn't waste time and decided to invite Bong-nim to join them. In the end, this resulted in everyone going to the same restaurant and eating together, which is the opposite of what Yeondu wanted. To make things better, the two mothers decide to go out together to enjoy the rest of the day, leaving the couple alone. On the way to the annex, Taekyung comments that he won't give up on their relationship and that now he will try to win her over. However, saying these things makes the protagonist argue with him and even get out of the vehicle. The next day, Hyun-woo was at the pharmacy of the woman with a son when Ji Myung passed by and got jealous seeing him so comfortable with another woman. Thus, Ji Myung decided to enter the place and ask for medicine to help with her pregnancy, which made it clear about her condition and that, in appearances, she is Dr. Cha's wife. Meanwhile, we see Madam Eun continuing her lessons with Yeondu, and outside the family context, the lady even behaves like a normal person. In the next scene, it's shown that Junha is back in the country, ready to join the Gong family company. In the next scene, we see that the protagonist agreed with Taekyung that they should proceed with the schedule of informing their families about the couple's separation. However, before telling them, Yeon-do will first find a place to move into. To her surprise, the doctor agreed without hesitation and even gave her the phone number and address of the real estate agency that was helping him find a residence at that time. Meanwhile, Se-jin begins to panic even more because when she went to tell Madam Eun about what she discovered about the protagonist's ex-boyfriend, the lady told her secretary to let it go, and at that moment, Se-jin realized that even her partner was abandoning her. Without Madam Eun, the secretary might not achieve her goal, so in a desperate act, Se-jin calls the lady old and questions whether she remembers the day she expelled her family from the annex years ago, as if they were objects and not people with emotions. Madam Eun doesn't understand what Se-jin is saying and is even shocked by the secretary's change in behavior. But as the woman is leaving the residence, we see the backstory of this misunderstanding. Rewinding in time, Se-jin lived in the annex with her family, and on a certain day, the young woman caught the lady arguing with her mother, who was on her knees at Madam Eun's feet, begging her not to expel them. The lady made this decision after finding something belonging to Se-jin in the boys' room. At that time, Taekyung and Chunmyeong shared the same room because the family was in the annex. Thinking that the young woman was offering herself to her beloved grandson, obviously Chunmyeong, Madam Eun proceeded to throw them out, especially after she developed slight suspicions that Taekyung might be the person she was involved with. That's when Se-jin's mother started blaming the girl's father for their situation, as the private school wasn't bringing much return. The woman created a rift between daughter and father, which lingers to this day, as we can see. And do you remember those things Se-jin said when she was young to Taekyung? In reality, she was angry at the boy's family and ended up taking it out on him. Se-jin liked Taekyung a lot, but the anger blinded her so much that today she has become a woman who cannot be trusted. Returning to the present day, as Se-jin is leaving through the gate, she sees the doctor also heading to work, and at that moment, she warns him not to provoke her because she is still deciding what to do. Of course, Taekyung didn't understand what the secretary meant, but Chonsik also heard Se-jin's threat. Meanwhile, at Bongnim's house, Daesang comments to Dongwook that he changed his mind about Sujayam not being part of the company where Yumayong works because the young woman seems to like the girl a lot and noticed some details that even they might not see. This conversation between the two results in Dongwook going to Yumayong's company and signing a contract with her. However, the man warns her not to do anything crazy, and during the discussion about the paperwork with her boss, Dongwook tells the story of Sujayam's mother, who abandoned her at a young age. Moving on to Chunmyeong, we see that his meeting with Junha to discuss business seems to have gone very well, and when the man answered a call from Se-jin, Junha commented that he had heard about her. Back to our beloved protagonist, Yeon-do begins her search for a place to live. However, she didn't expect to find Taekyung at the real estate agency, and since the man decided to accompany her on the house visits, he criticized every place. As a result, the protagonist ended up dismissing the realtor and, of course, argued with Taekyung about his attitude. But later, while sharing a meal, Taekyung asks her to also accept how he feels because he will do the same and invites her to go on a date with him that night. Giving it a chance, Yeon-do ends up accepting. Meanwhile, Junha finally answered one of the many calls Se-jin was making, and when she mentioned having something important to discuss with him about Yeon-do, the two arranged a meeting. Switching to Ji-myung, we see that the proposal she prepared for a meeting with the president and shareholders was very well received, especially with encouragement from Sang-hoon. However, during the process, Ji-myung began experiencing severe cramps, and noticing that the woman wasn't well, Sang-hoon put her in his car and took her to her husband's clinic. However, before getting out, Ji-myung said she didn't want to be examined there and asked him to take her somewhere else. But during the brief time they remained parked, Dr. Cha saw them together, and his suspicions that something was happening between the two increased. Continuing with the pair inside the vehicle, Sang-hoon tries to calm her down, saying that it won't happen like last time when the woman ended up spontaneously losing the baby she was carrying, which left her very distraught at the time. Hearing these words, we viewers can conclude that Ji Myung didn't actually have an abortion as Hyun-woo accused her, but we also can't blame Dr. Cha. After all, the woman isn't very honest with him. In the next scene, we see Chun Myung taking his wife out for a meal, and he made a very important decision so that the couple can have a child. Since the difficulty in conceiving is on the man's side, Chun Myung mentioned that they should find a donor so that Soo-jong can carry a baby, and as it is something very unexpected, the woman is shocked and decides to leave. Returning to Ji Myung, at another clinic, she ensures that everything is fine with her baby, and after they leave the place, she thanks Sang-hoon for his help, both now and back then. Switching to Junha's meeting with Se-jin, we see that the woman just wanted to confirm if the baby wasn't his, but even though the man repeatedly denied being the father, the secretary still didn't believe him. Junha was surprised to learn that Yeon-do and Tae-kyung are still together, and with nothing more to discuss, Se-jin leaves. Meanwhile, the protagonist decided to meet with that realtor without the doctor knowing and signed a contract with her 2 months in advance, but asked the woman to keep it a secret. Yeon-do also mentioned that Tae-kyung is not her husband. Later, when the protagonist arrives home, we see that she gets emotional upon hearing her mother-in-law talking about how excited she is to meet Real, and seeing someone so dear excited to see a grandchild that isn't actually hers makes Yeon-do start crying and apologizing to In-ok, who is obviously surprised and confused. In the next scene, we see Jang-ho retrieving some things from his old residence, and while talking to his ex-wife, the man finally realizes that Yeon-do is Tae-kyung's current wife and that his daughter lied to everyone, claiming she was the one who saved the woman. Switching to Ji Myung, we see her discussing with Hyun-woo before bed about what happened earlier and calming him down by saying the baby is fine. But for the first time, the woman notices that the man seems to have finally given up on maintaining a relationship with her. And downstairs, Chonsik checks with Tae-kyung to see if Se-jin isn't up to something because of the conversation he overheard between them earlier, but the doctor tells his stepfather not to worry, everything is fine. Later, in a conversation with his wife, Chonsik comments that he is happy that Tae-kyung now has someone to share his life with and confesses that he knows it's his fault Tae-kyung was treated that way all this time by his family. Thus, he apologizes to In-ok for bringing this pain to her and their son. The couple's conversation is interrupted when someone delivers a letter to the man late at night. Upon opening it, it's a warning written with letters cut from a magazine, advising the president to be careful with Se-jin. Moving on to our young couple's date, we see Tae-kyung takes the protagonist to a car camping site, where he asks if they can try to start a new relationship that night. Yeon-do goes along with it, and during the date, she realizes that she also likes the doctor. However, she is equally afraid of getting hurt again, especially now that she is carrying a child. Nevertheless, the protagonist musters up the courage and decides by the end of the night to propose to Tae-kyung that they spend the last months of the contract as a real married couple, allowing them to test their feelings. So, my dear viewers, we will finally see these two as a real couple. The next day, the Gong family continues to have conflicts. The protagonist doesn't like the way Ji Myung treats her mother-in-law, leading to a physical altercation between Yeon-do and her sister-in-law, with the pregnant women nearly pulling each other's hair out, only to be separated by their husbands. Once things calm down, Ji Myung reassures Hyun-woo about her and Sang-hoo, explaining that they are nothing more than friends. Meanwhile, influenced by the confident Yeon-do, In-ok also stands up to Madam Moon when the lady starts speaking ill of the protagonist during a meal, and later, she realizes how liberating it is. Focusing now on Chonsik, he realizes how bad a person Se-jin is when his younger daughter comments that Madam Moon said the secretary hasn't given up on Tae-kyung, and now Chonsik is finally opening his eyes to the woman. Thus, the man gives Se-jin a vote of confidence and asks if there's anything he should know. However, the secretary swears she is completely transparent with the president, and now, what will the man do? Well, surprises keep coming for the secretary because Junha appears at the company for a meeting with Chansik, and Sejin feels her world crumbling once again. Later, she meets with Junha and asks if he was the one who sent that anonymous letter to Chansik. At this moment, we find out that apparently, it wasn't the man, which surprised me too. I have a theory that it might have been her father. What do you think? Continuing, Junha questions why Sejin doubts that Yeondu's baby is Taekyung's, and the woman mentions the superficial marriage he offered her, which might be the same proposal the doctor made to the protagonist, helping her avoid being a single mother. Sejin's theory intrigued Junha, and now he seems willing to find out if the baby is his. Meanwhile, at Bongnim's establishment, the lady caught Woo-hee about to steal money from the register, so she was going to call the woman for a talk when Dae-sang appeared and said he would handle it. It turns out that Woo-hee was almost taking this action because of a debt in her name at a hospital that charges her daily, and knowing that the woman is not a bad person, Dae-sang says it's okay when she tells him the truth. The man also adds an important question for Woo-hee, asking if she wants to be his girlfriend so he can take care of her and her child, but Woo-hee said she would give him an answer. Later, we see that Jang Ho and Bongnim are getting closer. Could we have another new couple? The next day, Hyun Woo and Taekyung plan to take their wives to a surprise yoga class to help them make peace, but the opposite happened. In fact, the two started competing against each other. Then, Dr. Cha was on his way to work when he passed by that pharmacy, where he has a friendship with the owner and her son, and noticed some commotion around it. It turned out that there was a drunk man inside causing trouble, so the man helped the owner by immobilizing the individual. Meanwhile, at Jang Ho's school, Bongnim and Madamoon are competing for the student council presidency. In the next scene, we see Taekyung returning to his office only to find Junha waiting for him. The man is there to verify if what Sejin said was true. However, the doctor explained that he is not a fool who would accept and raise someone else's baby. In fact, he was quite convincing in his words, and Junha left fuming with anger because Taekyung made it clear that he doesn't want the man near his wife and certainly not looking for him again about a matter that is already resolved. Later, we see Jang Ho having an honest conversation with Bongnim, where he confesses to writing a letter to his daughter's boss, telling the man not to trust her. Jang Ho explains that he did this because he can no longer stand seeing Sejin hurting and lying to people just to get what she wants. He feels like a completely incompetent father for having raised her this way and blames himself for her becoming this person. Bongnim is moved along with Jang Ho and advises him to pray for her because it's the only thing he can do at this moment to help her. The next day, since Yeondu didn't agree to assist in her election for school presidency, Madamoon resorted to donating designer clothes to the students, and in this regard, Bongnim knows she can't compete. But this act qualifies as something that disqualifies Madamoon from the elections, and using this to her advantage, Bongnim starts fighting to prevent the lady from competing further. Jang Ho was indeed doing the right thing by proceeding with the request. However, Yeondu appeared at the location to commit to helping Madamoon win fairly, and at that moment, Bongnim discovered that the protagonist is Madamoon's tutor. What upset Bongnim the most wasn't even the fact that her daughter returned to work, but rather that she would help her competitor. Meanwhile, Junha requested that Sejin be his secretary while he works with the Gong company, and later, we see the man promise that if she does her job right, he will reward her with something that will destroy Taekyung. Later, at the Gong family home, Sujong wanted to donate something she had to Yeondu, but only with the intention of feeling superior. The protagonist recognized her intentions and rejected the false kindness, saying she doesn't want her child to grow up seeing people doing that to each other, which obviously offended Sujong. Thinking that Madamoon would side with her, Sujong took the problem to the lady. However, to everyone's surprise, Madamoon told Sujong to stop bothering the pregnant women in the house, thus defending Yeondu. In the next scene, we switch to Dae-sang, who is upset that Woo-hee disappeared from work without any notice, and he is also waiting for her answer to that question. The next day, Yoo Myung meets the rest of Dong-wook's family and spends some hours with Soo-jaeum. Meanwhile, Yeon-do makes peace with Soo-jong and shares the pain of also having lost a baby. Later, Taekyung and the protagonist go to the family company for lunch with the president. Unfortunately, the two end up running into Junha. There isn't any confrontation, but nonetheless, Yeon-do needs a few minutes in the bathroom to compose herself. While waiting, Taekyung takes the opportunity to ask Se-jin what Junha was doing in the building, and at that moment, he discovers that the man is working with his stepfather. Switching to lunch with the president, the man receives the confirmation he needed to verify that Se-jin continues to cross the line with the couple. Thus, Chon-sik asks that from now on, the two inform him when something like this happens again. And an unexpected invitation arrives in the middle of the meal. Chon-sik and Taekyung are invited to a golf match with Junha the next day. So, to avoid any suspicion from the president about the secret they are keeping, the doctor says he will attend. In the next scene, we see Hyun-woo going to have lunch at a new restaurant that opened near the clinic. Since he was alone, he was seated at a table with another woman, who coincidentally is the pharmacy owner. In this unexpected encounter, Dr. Cha ends up talking about how his relationship with Ji Myung is going. Now that she's aware of the situation, does the pharmacy owner have a chance with Hyun-woo? Moving on to Jang Ho, we see him visiting his ex-wife's house to replace some burnt-out light bulbs for her, and after the work is done, she washes some of his clothes to please him. However, a receipt ends up falling out of his pocket, and later, we see that with this paper on the floor, Se-jin discovers that it was her father who sent that message to Chon-sik. As a consequence, Se-jin simply disappears the next day from everyone she knows and goes to a place to be alone and shed some tears. Meanwhile, at the golf game arranged between the president, Junha, Chun Myung, and Taekyung, it was evident from the start that the doctor was uncomfortable with Junha's presence. The president is one of the first to notice this, and after the men start a physical altercation in the bathroom, we see Chon-sik apologizing to Junha on behalf of his son. However, later we see Taekyung with the president in the car, and the elder comments that he noticed the doctor also had a red face, indicating that he only attacked after being provoked, and recognizes that going forward, he should avoid future encounters with Junha and his son. But at no point does Chon-sik blame the man for what happened. After all, the doctor was very polite and apologized for the confusion that wasn't his fault. What drove Taekyung crazy were several unpleasant comments from Junha, but mainly the man saying that Yeon-do would come after him, and it was only a matter of time until that happened. Of course, the president didn't hear anything about the men's argument, but even so, he thought that the main reason for this fight was a woman. In the next scene, we see the protagonist watching the presentations of the candidates for the student council presidency at school, thinking that Madam Moon would stick to what they agreed upon. At the last second, Yeon-do realized it was a lost cause because once again, the lady tried to use her power and money to buy votes, promising to pay for colleges and even health plans for her colleagues. Meanwhile, Hyun-woo was taking the nurses for coffee when he met Mrs. Han on the way, the pharmacy owner, and invited her to join them. However, in the end, it was just the two of them at the establishment, and Ji Myung, who decided to stop by the cafe to buy an afternoon coffee to please the clinic staff, became jealous when she saw them. Thus, she used Sang-hoon to try to make her husband jealous, which worked to some extent. At night, we see Soo-jong going to the protagonist to get some advice from her. It turns out that her sister-in-law still hasn't decided what to do about her husband's idea of having a child with the donation of something from another man so that she can carry the baby in her womb. In this case, Yeon-do was very good with her words. She managed to calm Soo-jong about the matter and even made her sister-in-law consider at least visiting a clinic to find out how it works. Meanwhile, when Hyun-woo and Ji Myung meet in their room, the woman continues her attempt to make her ex-husband jealous, saying she's going out with Sang-hoon with ulterior motives. And when she says Dr. Cha should do the same with Mrs. Han, she realizes he didn't deny the idea, which makes her even angrier. Returning to Soo-jong, Her husband was very happy to hear that she will at least visit the place to understand how his proposal about that method for having a child works. In the next scene, we see Yeondu teaching Madam Eun in the middle of the night, thinking it would be a good time for no one to interrupt them. However, Taekyung wakes up when she leaves the bed. And he doesn't hesitate to go get her, especially after feeling jealous when he reads a message from Junha on her phone, a message Yeondu hadn't even read yet. As soon as he takes her back to the room, Taekyung says he's known about his grandmother's secret for a few days now, but he doesn't want to share the time he has with his wife with someone who has harmed them so much. The two end up arguing, but the worst part is that Yeondu uses a word to describe the doctor, which is the same one Junha used in his messages to refer to the man, making Taekyung upset. Yeondu realized her mistake as soon as she picked up her phone, and now she'll have to find a way to fix it. The next day, the protagonist arranged to meet with Junha to ask him to stay out of her and Taekyung's lives. However, the man is such a bad person that he even sent a message to the doctor saying Yeondu came after him, just as he predicted during their golf fight. Junha responds to the protagonist that he won't step aside for the couple. On the contrary, wherever he goes and finds them, he'll make sure to make it clear that he knows them. Subsequently, Taekyung arrives at the establishment, and thinking he would have started a big fight between the couple, the doctor demonstrates otherwise to Junha and treats him calmly. Of course, Yeondu plays along so that the man stops bothering them. Thus, Junha soon leaves, unable to stand seeing Taekyung and the protagonist acting like two teenagers. As soon as they are alone, our young couple makes amends. Meanwhile, the president decided he would fire Se-jin for all the lies and things she did to Taekyung, but with the woman gone, he first needs her to return. So, Chonsik calls Jang-ho to inform him of what he will do with the man's daughter and then provides the possible location of his daughter so that Jang-ho can go get her. In the next scene, we see Soo-jong and Chun Myung at the clinic to learn exactly how the method works. Unfortunately, it's likely that the couple will need a private donation, and since they are willing to pay a lot of money for it, Woo-hee, who was cleaning the lobby near them and overheard the conversation, became interested, but she would need a man for that. Meanwhile, Taekyung decided to take Yeondu's place in her study sessions with Madam Eun. Since his wife is sleeping, he wanted to let her rest, and in the few minutes he spent with the lady, the doctor took revenge for all the times she was mean to him. Taekyung was such an aggressive teacher that he even made his grandmother cry. Returning to Se-jin, her father couldn't get her out of the place where she was hiding, but a call from Junha did. Later, we see the two together, and an alliance is formed between them. Junha believes the baby is his, and for that reason, he will do everything to take Yeondu for himself. So, if Se-jin helps him, Taekyung will be hers. The next day, the duo begins their plans, and by deceiving the president, Junha manages to keep Se-jin as the family secretary a bit longer by pretending there's an issue only she can resolve, making it seem like he will leave the company otherwise. They turn Taekyung's fight with Junha into a big reason for the man not to work at the company anymore, and by involving Yeondu in the story, Se-jin orchestrated a grand charade. In the next scene, we see Taekyung apologizing to Junha in front of his brother so that the family business isn't harmed. As expected, Junha starts to overstep, asking the doctor to do more absurd things, like serving his drink. However, the situation worsens when Yeondu arrives at the scene, orchestrated by Se-jin. The protagonist quietly removes Taekyung from the situation, but Chun Myung doesn't understand what's happening or why Yeondu is involved in this story. Later, the duo's charade works again, and Se-jin, along with Junha, meets with the president to inform him that Junha will continue with the company, provided the secretary stays as well, which obviously makes Chonsik reconsider firing her. The next day, we see In-ok going out with Yeondu, Taekyung, and Hyunwoo for a knitting class. Initially, it was supposed to be just the lady and the protagonist, but since the two men would be bored at home, they decided to join. However, Dr. Cha went back to get his wallet while the rest waited at the gate, and at that moment, the trio overheard Sang-hoon, who was dropping off Ji Myung at home, confessing his feelings to her. At the same moment, Taekyung took Hyunwoo inside so his brother-in-law wouldn't hear those words, and In-ok was left speechless. Later, we move to Yeondu sharing a taxi with Yoo Myung, who is confused about her feelings for Dong-wook. She asks the protagonist for advice on dating a guy who is a single father. Yeondu has no idea that her sister-in-law is talking about her brother, but in any case, she says she would like her brother to find someone who loves him regardless of anything, if that were the case. Meanwhile, Ji Myung was arriving at the company when she encountered Sejin and Junha at the building's entrance. It seems she doesn't remember the scandal the man caused back then, but will this memory resurface at some point? In the next scene, we move to the election at Jang Ho's school, and Bong-nim wins. Of course, this upsets Madam Moon, but at least Yeondu is there to console her. At night, at the Gong family home, Junha and Sejin manage to make our couple uncomfortable when they are invited to dinner with everyone. But when Junha is leaving, he surprises Taekyung by apologizing for everything he caused the couple, and I wouldn't doubt that this is part of his plans. The next day, we see Woo-hee starting her act as well, as she pretends not to have gotten pregnant to Soo-jong, who is crying in the clinic's bathroom. Thus, since the women are supposedly going through a similar situation, Woo-hee suggests they exchange numbers to support each other. Bringing Dae-sang into this scheme, but without his knowledge, Woo-hee meets with him later and agrees to start dating him. Back to our protagonist, she and Taekyung attend the opening of Soo-jong's parents' gallery and are surprised to find Sejin and Junha together. Now the two are presenting themselves as a couple but ask Yeondu and the doctor to keep it a secret. However, later, the protagonist takes a call from the realtor on the building stairs, and since she doesn't speak in a low tone, Junha, who is higher up, hears that she plans to move in a few weeks to live alone. In the next scene, the fake couple is caught by Chun Myung and Soo-jong together, which means Sejin and Junha must now hope that the gossipers don't spread the news about them. After all, an office romance won't please Chon-sik and could hinder their plans to separate Taekyung and the protagonist. Meanwhile, at Bong-nim's restaurant, Dae-sang brings his girlfriend to apologize to his sister for leaving the job without any notice. To make amends, Woo-hee agrees to a pay cut and begs Bong-nim to keep her job. Later, we see Yoo Myung during her shift, feeling anxious after discovering that her boss has set up a meeting with Dong-wook. As we know, before having this superior-subordinate relationship, the two were friends, and the boss had confided in Yoo Myung about her interest in Dong-wook. However, Yoo Myung, still confused about her own feelings, acts impulsively and intercepts Dong-wook before he meets her boss, whisking him away, all under her boss's watchful eye. Now, the two of them are talking while receiving multiple calls from the boss who wants to know what's happening. Focusing on their conversation, Dong-wook explains that he only agreed to meet Yoo Myung's boss to let her down gently. As we know, he doesn't intend to date anyone until Soo-jayum is self-sufficient. At this moment, Yoo Myung musters the courage to express her feelings and confusion, stating that she would like to try something with him if he's open to it. Meanwhile, at the Gong household, Ji Myung begins to suspect that In-ok overheard Sang-hoon's declaration that day at the gate because the lady keeps pestering her not to stay away from Hyun-woo. In the next scene, we see Taekyung waking up in the middle of the night, noticing the protagonist is missing from their bed. He decides to look for her around the house and hears her talking in the office. Yeondu, thinking she's alone, expresses her feelings to her baby. She knows Taekyung will be a great father, but she doesn't want to create that bond between him and the child, as their relationship is set to end in a few weeks, and Yeondu doesn't want it to be more difficult than it already is. The next day, we start with Jang Ho's ex-wife visiting him at Bong-nim's house. She brings lunch for the family and, while talking privately with Jang Ho, addresses two issues. First, she wants to cancel the divorce and asks him to return home. Secondly, she comments on Sejin not being fired. At this point, Jang Ho mentions the anonymous letter he sent to Chonsik regarding their daughter. He thought, like I did, that his ex-wife wouldn't approve of his actions, but surprisingly, she agrees that Se-jin needs to be stopped somehow. Meanwhile, Ji Myung calls the protagonist to her office at Gong Enterprises and questions Yeon-do if she heard Sang-hoon's declaration along with In-ok. Being straightforward, Yeon-do admits she did and advises Ji Myung to tell In-ok everything when she gets home, so the lie about their fake marriage doesn't drag on any longer. Exiting the company, Yeon-do encounters a heavy rainstorm, and since Jun-ha is there with his vehicle, he offers her a ride. Although Yeon-do hesitates at first, she eventually agrees, considering the baby's well-being. Se-jin witnesses this moment, which later leads to an argument between them. Continuing with Yeon-do in the car, Jun-ha mentions that after the project with Gong Enterprises ends, he plans to return to the United States with Se-jin, which somewhat relieves the protagonist. Upon arriving home, Yeon-do shares with In-ok the conversation she had with Ji Myung, and In-ok is surprised to realize Hyun-woo must know his wife is seeing another man. Speaking of him, in the next scene, we see Dr. Cha visiting the pharmacy to speak with Mrs. Han and let her down gently. He understands her feelings but can't start a new relationship while still in love with Ji Myung. Nevertheless, Hyun-woo agrees to remain friends with her son, and later, we see the three of them enjoying a day at the park. The little one becomes comfortable with Dr. Cha and, with his mother present, expresses his wish for Hyun-woo to be his father, just as In-ok arrives. She is furious upon witnessing this scene, and after reprimanding her son-in-law, who confesses the whole truth, she heads to Ji Myung's office and demands to see her there. Meanwhile, Se-jin argues with Jun-ha about the scene she witnessed earlier and for catching him with gifts for the protagonist's baby. She makes it clear that he should not stray from their plan, or everything will fall apart. Returning to In-ok, when Ji Myung arrives at her office, she finds the lady sitting at her desk. In-ok makes it clear to her daughter-in-law that she must resign from the company, or In-ok will ensure Chonsik proceeds with her dismissal since such secrets aren't tolerated within the Gong family. In the next scene, we see Taekyung waking up again without his beloved by his side, but today he decides to do things differently. When he finds Yeon-do talking to the baby, Taekyung joins her. Moving on to Hyun-woo and Ji Myung, the two are talking to figure out how to resolve their situation. Taking advantage of the honesty prevailing at the moment, both confess they're not seeing other people and were only trying to make each other jealous. Regardless, the next day, things start to change. First, Yeon-do convinces Madam Moon to take her and Taekyung out for lunch. Then we see Ji Myung treating In-ok as best as possible so she doesn't follow through with removing her from the company. Meanwhile, headlines about Taekyung's child not being his surface, and Se-jin takes the issue to Chonsik along with Jun-ha. Initially, the president accuses the secretary of wrongdoing, as given how she's been acting, it wouldn't be surprising. However, to alleviate suspicion of Se-jin, Jun-ha reveals they're dating, suggesting it must be someone else. In the next scene, we switch to Yoo Myung, who risked getting fired after the scene with Dong-wook. However, her friend reassures her that everything's fine and wishes her luck in their relationship. Later, we see the girl meeting Soo Jaeum, who called because she couldn't reach her uncle and grandmother. It turns out her father is very feverish, and the girl was desperate, not knowing what to do, so Yoo Myung decides to take care of them for a while. Back to the president, after reading that news, he decides to cancel all his appointments and heads to a bar to drink. Taking advantage of Chonsik's vulnerability, Jun-ha joined the chairman and started telling stories to make him suspicious of Yeon-do. It seems to be working to some extent, as Chonsik admits finding the beginning of his son's relationship with her strange. Meanwhile, Ji Myung can no longer endure the anxiety over her problem with In-ok, so she decides to kneel before her and tell the whole truth from the start. After doing so, they agree that In-ok will consider changing her mind about Ji Myung leaving the company, but she must not lie anymore. Later, The chairman arrives home with Junha, and after Taekyung puts Chansik to bed, Junha tells him about the headline regarding Yeondu's baby. As a result, the next day, Taekyung goes early to Chansik's office to tell the president the whole truth. Naturally, Chansik orders Taekyung to end his relationship with the protagonist, but the doctor refuses, stating he truly loves her now, adding that he will convince her not to leave him. In the next scene, we turn to Hyun-woo, who was going to see Ji Myung at the company when he ends up meeting Sang-hoon in the elevator, and the two men decide to have a conversation. Sang-hoon finally reveals the secret he and Ji Myung have been keeping. It turns out that the baby Dr. Cha accused his wife of removing was lost spontaneously, and to avoid hurting him, Ji Myung lied. So for a year, the man has been blaming her for something that was also a surprise to her, as she didn't even know she was pregnant, and Sang-hoon was the one there to support her. Later, we see Taekyung making a request to the protagonist. Taekyung opens his heart and says he wants to discover what fatherhood is alongside Yeondu. He didn't have his biological father present in his life and felt rejected by Chansik, but he wants things to be different for real. Thus, it seems the protagonist agrees to raise the baby with him. Meanwhile, Hyun-woo questions Ji Myung once more about her secret with Sang-hoon, and this time, she tells the whole truth, which is the story we heard earlier. But honestly, I don't understand what's up with the man, as Dr. Cha feels deeply offended that Ji Myung carried this pain alone and once again blames her for the end of their relationship, so again, Hyun-woo decides to take a break. Leaving Ji Myung, who is now pregnant with his child, devastated. And worst of all, in my sincere opinion, was that Dr. Cha went to cry his emotions in the arms of Mrs. Han. The next day, things don't get better. Yeondu finds Ji Myung nearly fainting and exhausted from all the stress of the previous night. The woman cries in front of her sister-in-law and comments that Hyun-woo has left. In the next scene, we move to Woo-hee, who invited Soo-jong to hang out, and during their outing, we see Soo-jong venting about the donation of special fluid, which has been difficult for the couple to find a man for. Now we see Yeondu being called to Chansik's office. He shows the protagonist the headline, and after she begins to cry, he asks her to immediately end things with Taekyung since the doctor won't do it. Yeondu left the president's office very distraught, and as Taekyung suspected the chairman might act, he was heading toward the company when he saw the protagonist nearly fainting on the sidewalk. Fortunately, Junha, who had passed by her as he exited the building, was nearby and caught her before Yeondu fell to the ground, but from her leg, we can see that the bleeding began. Junha helps Taekyung take the protagonist to the clinic, and as soon as they enter, the doctor asks Junha to leave. Sejin's mother was present when Yeondu was being carried in by Taekyung, so when she tells Sejin, we see the secretary bringing the news to Chansik. In the next scene, Junha angrily goes to the Gong family company, ready to confront the president, as he is one of the people he holds responsible for what happened to the protagonist. He enters Chansik's office, but fortunately for them, Chansik had already left for the clinic. Sejin tries to calm Junha, who only relaxes after finding out that both the woman and the baby are fine. Back with Taekyung, we see Yeondu has been taken to a room to rest and be observed. Taekyung stays by her side the entire time, and when her belongings are brought in, the doctor notices the matching mother and baby bracelets he had given her were in her bag. Taking the box, Taekyung discovers that his beloved had a third bracelet made with his name on it, and at this moment, he becomes even more emotional. Later, the president visits Taekyung, and in the doctor's office, we see the two of them talking. Despite the scare, Chansik wants his son to separate from Yeondu and even goes as far as to threaten to tell In-ok if Taekyung continues with the woman. But Taekyung makes it clear that he would rather be seen as a stranger by the president than as a son under these circumstances. Now let's talk about happier things. Yoo Myung is taking care of Soo Jaeum so that Dong-wook can attend an interview, and taking advantage of the moment alone, she delicately talks to the girl about her feelings towards her father. In the end, Soo-jaeum fully supports the idea of the two becoming a couple. At night, Taekyung leaves Yeondu's side for a few hours and goes to the Gong family house to talk to Chonsik. There, he kneels in front of the residents to apologize to the president and, through tears, explains that he doesn't want to leave the protagonist because his life changed completely with her. Without the woman, he would return to being a lonely person mistreated by the rest of his family, so Taekyung implores the president to keep the secret, and when the time is right, he and Yeondu will tell the family. Chonsik ends up accepting this truce but wishes for Real to be as bad of a child as Taekyung, which, considering Taekyung's resilience and kindness, means he would be a wonderful child. The next day, before sunrise, Junha takes advantage of the probably empty clinic to visit Yeondu and brings some food with him. In the protagonist's room, he recalls having told her to terminate the pregnancy if she ever became pregnant by him, and now he apologizes for saying that. He leaves shortly after, but Hyun-woo, already awake and sleeping on site, spots the strange man with a cap and tries to see who it is. However, Junha is faster and leaves before Dr. Cha can identify him. Then Taekyung arrives at the clinic, and when his brother-in-law explains about the strange man, the doctor immediately knows it's Junha and goes to her room to check if everything is alright. Later, we see Dong-wook telling Yoo-myung about what happened to his sister. Despite the striking similarity to what happened with her sister-in-law, who is also in the hospital, it doesn't cross their minds that it could be the same person. Meanwhile, Sejin and Junha are summoned to the president's office, where Chonsik asks them to forget about the headline involving Taekyung. He also makes it clear that if the news spreads, he will know it was them, as only the three of them and those involved know about the rumor. Afterward, the secretary and Junha go to his new apartment to think of a new plan, as the previous one is no longer viable. While considering the story Yeondu and the doctor told about how they met, both realize that the protagonist is the person who scratched the wrong car that day at the hotel, meaning she was already pregnant at that time, which makes Junha the real father, but neither shares this thought with the other. Now it seems both want to pursue what they think is best, even if they continue maintaining a false partnership. It's worth noting that the protagonist still doesn't know that Sejin was Junha's mistress, unlike the secretary, who has already connected all the dots. Switching to Woo-hee, we see she sets up a couples meeting with Soo-jong, but she wants Dae-sang to change his entire look to appear wealthy. When he realizes this, he argues with his girlfriend and says he won't meet her friends until Woo-hee loses the shame of him being a simpler person. If you missed the previous video, Woo-hee is plotting for Dae-sang to be a donor for the couple who wants to conceive, but she hasn't told her boyfriend, and I can't see how this will work. Returning to the protagonist, Ji-myung visits after learning her sister-in-law is well. Yeondu encourages Ji-myung to pursue Hyun-woo and honestly express her feelings, as only then can two proud people resolve their issues. However, the conversation doesn't go as Ji-myung expected, because before she can say anything, Dr. Cha requests a divorce, claiming he doesn't understand why she didn't trust him enough to tell the truth about what happened to their first baby, even though Ji-myung explained she was exhausted and didn't know what to do. Honestly, I used to love Hyun-woo's character, but now he just frustrates me as he continually upsets his wife, who is now pregnant, something he wanted so much. In the next scene, we see Woo-hee dining with Soo-jong and Chun-myung. Dae-sang indeed doesn't show up for dinner with the couple, taking the opportunity to mention that her fake husband wants to make a donation to help couples. Woo-hee gives them hope that they are finally a step closer to having a child. On the way out, Dae-sang picks up Woo-hee in a borrowed car and the clothes she had set aside for him. But in the vehicle, he makes it clear to his girlfriend that this is the first and last time he will do this, as Dae-sang isn't ashamed of who he is, nor should Woo-hee be. Returning to our protagonist, she gives Taekyung the present, connecting the three more than ever. However, as peace is short-lived in dramas, as soon as the doctor returns to the clinic reception, he encounters Junha. Junha is there to say he knows the baby is his and that he will seek his rights to claim the child, which obviously starts a conflict between the two. However, Yeondu soon appears and says she wants to speak with Junha privately. In the room, the protagonist makes it clear to Junha that even though Taekyung isn't the biological father, he has been the one caring for real so far, making him more of a father than someone who merely shows up to cause trouble. Yeondu adds that even if the doctor hadn't appeared in her life, she would never return to Junha, as she hasn't forgotten what he did and was willing to raise the child alone. It is only at this moment that the protagonist realizes that it was Junha who wrote that headline. Due to all the stress, the protagonist soon starts feeling some pain again, prompting her to yell at Junha to leave and never show up again. Once Yeondu has calmed down, she and Taekyung agree to reveal the truth to both their families, ensuring that this issue can no longer be used against them. Later, the couple returns home, and upon reaching the annex, they find Chansik waiting for them. He promises not to trouble them about their secret anymore, but hopes that one day they will confess and ask for the family's forgiveness. Meanwhile, Ji Myung has spent the past few days bedridden, affected by her husband's decision. Sensing that something is wrong, In-ok talks to her, and for the first time, Ji Myung is honest. In-ok advises Ji Myung to have another conversation with Dr. Cha, sharing all her fears and expressing that she needs him by her side for the strength to continue with the pregnancy and that she loves him. Returning to the protagonist, Lady Yoon takes the chance when the two are alone in the annex to show how much she studied while Yeondu was in the clinic. During these lessons, Taekyung finds a letter Lady Yoon began writing to someone named Strawberry. As soon as the doctor questions her about it, Lady Yoon decides to head home. Meanwhile, Ji Myung approaches her husband to discuss her feelings, pleading with him not to give up on building a family with her. The two agree that Ji Myung will be sincere about her feelings and not keep them to herself, allowing for more honest communication. Later, they attend a dinner celebrating Yeondu and Real's well-being. We see that Yeondu and the baby received many gifts and much affection from the Gong family. The evening improves even more when Taekyung calls Chansik father in front of everyone, a small gesture that brings great joy to his mother. The next day, Sejin returns to her frantic behavior, arranging a meeting with In-ok and Junha. Junha only learns of the meeting's purpose during the conversation and, determined not to stress Yeondu again, manages to leave the situation without revealing the protagonist's secret, much to the secretary's anger, thus ending their partnership. Meanwhile, Yeondu and Lady Yoon are out together. Yeondu offers to correct the grammar in Lady Yoon's letter to Strawberry without questioning the content. Afterward, while in the bathroom, Lady Yoon leaves the establishment after spotting a child resembling this person called Strawberry. This leads to her getting lost and panicking, while Yeondu searches for her with Taekyung's help. Dr. Cha finds Lady Yoon first, sitting with tears streaming down her face at the entrance of a building with Strawberry's name. She feels a wave of relief when she sees him. Later, in Lady Yoon's room, we learn what prompted her to leave like that. Years ago, when she had no money and lived with her mother-in-law, she had a daughter nicknamed Strawberry. One day, she returned home to find her mother-in-law had given the child away. Lady Yoon knew they couldn't care for the little one, especially after Chansik fell ill. Fearful of losing him too, she stopped searching, but she never forgot her little girl. This is a secret Lady Yoon has kept, one even Chansik doesn't know. She asks the couple not to mention it and, for the first time, genuinely thanks them for having Taekyung as her grandson. In the next scene, we see Yoo Myung and Dong-wook on a date. She expresses her feelings for the last time, prompting him to give this unexpected love a chance, and they start dating. The following day, Yeondu and Taekyung announce at breakfast that they wish to share something very important with the entire family that evening, intending to reveal the truth. However, the truth comes out earlier than planned when, at a company event, Sejin plans to tell In-ok the couple's secret. Despite Junha's attempts to disrupt the secretary's plan, he informs Yeondu of what is about to happen, and as In-ok steps out to take a call, she finds Yeondu on her knees, apologizing for lying about the baby being Taekyung's. In-ok immediately panics and refuses to let Yeondu touch her. Sejin seizes the opportunity to be by In-ok's side. In-ok leaves the event and goes straight to Taekyung's clinic, where, after confirming the truth with her son, she declares that she will no longer accept Yeondu or the child as part of her family, despite her son's wishes. Things worsen at the Gong family home, where, before they can explain to Lady Eun, In-ok causes another scene, ruining their chance to clarify in front of everyone once more. Later, after each couple member listens to what everyone has to say, Taekyung leaves Yeondu to recuperate in the annex and confronts Junha to find out what he and Sejin are plotting. Focusing on In-ok and Chonsik's conversation, he confesses to his wife that he already knew the truth and comments that he doesn't believe this is the right way to handle the situation. After all, his family treated Taekyung the way In-ok is treating Yeondu's baby, and she didn't like it. As expected, In-ok ignores these words and even goes to the annex to take Yeondu, against the protagonist's will, to her family's home to tell Bong-nim and the others, without allowing Taekyung to be by her side. Once again, we see another family in turmoil, but at least Dae-sang is present to support and protect his niece. When Taekyung calls Yeondu, In-ok forces her to lie to her son. In the next scene, In-ok demands Taekyung choose between her and Yeondu in the annex, prompting him to reaffirm his desire to live his life with the protagonist. While packing, Taekyung receives a call from Yeondu via Dae-sang's phone, as Bong-nim confiscated hers. She asks him to stay in the annex so that in the coming days they can work on gaining both families' forgiveness and, hopefully, be together in the future. Now, I have to express my frustration with this drama. They are two 30-year-old adults who pay their own bills. Despite cultural differences, I find it hard to believe a 30-year-old woman hands her phone over to her mother and gets grounded like a teenager. The next day, Yeondu goes to the Gong family home to beg for In-ok's forgiveness, while Taekyung does the same at Bong-nim's house. Unlike In-ok, Bong-nim expresses her disappointment with the couple's actions and her pain in not allowing them to be together. Unfortunately, the conversation is interrupted by Taekyung receiving a call from his grandmother, warning him that Yeondu is at their house. When he arrives, he hears his mother saying she detests both the protagonist and the baby. Bong-nim gives in to the couple's desires and helps them by kneeling to plead for In-ok's forgiveness as well, but In-ok remains blinded by rage and refuses to have anything more to do with this family. In-ok continues to blackmail the doctor, demanding he choose between her and his beloved, but Taekyung's response has changed. He now says he wants both in his life, so he and Yeondu will wait for In-ok to become comfortable with them living as a couple again. Later, Taekyung takes the protagonist to get some fresh air by the beach, and amidst the chaos, they find a moment of relaxation and decide on the name Hanol for the baby. In the next scene, we see Woo-hee and Soo-jong together in an establishment. Woo-hee is once again acting and cries while pretending she needs a loan, so Soo-jong seems willing to help her with that. However, when Woo-hee goes to the bathroom to wash her face, Soo-jong seems to know the truth. Soon, Chun Myung joins the women, and even Woo-hee is surprised because she wasn't expecting him, but her plan falls apart when Dae-sang appears. It turns out that Soo-jong found Woo-hee's behavior strange. After all, she was a complete stranger interested in the couple, so when she investigated, she decided to call the woman's supposed husband to corner the two of them. But as soon as Woo-hee saw Dae-sang, she left, and when the couple was alone with him, they realized that he had also been deceived. Later, Dae-sang returns to the family restaurant devastated, and Woo-hee was there waiting for him. She apologized, but now the man doesn't want to hear more of his beloved's lies and asks her never to show up in front of him again. Woo-hee says she only did it because of her son Hung-jun, who is very ill, and she owes a lot to the hospital where he is receiving treatment. But in a way, she understands the man's disappointment with her, and upon leaving the restaurant, we see the woman calling her boy and informing him that his grandmother will take care of him for a while, as she will be in another city looking for a better job. Meanwhile, Taekyung was about to sleep when he received a call from Bang Nim, who wants to know what time Yeondu will be home, which worries the doctor since he left her a long time ago in front of the house. Obviously, the man drives to Bang Nim's house so they can think together about where the protagonist might have gone, but soon Dong-wook appears with a letter Yeondu wrote to her family, and now it dawns on everyone that she left. Regardless, Taekyung and Bang Nim don't give up on finding her, so they go to the bus station to look for her. Switching to the protagonist at the location, she ends up taking the same bus as Woo-hee, and the two empathize with each other because they are going through difficult times. Before the bus departs, Yeondu sees her beloved and her mother getting on the vehicles and looking for her, which breaks her heart, but the protagonist had already made her decision. As soon as dawn breaks, Taekyung decides to go home, and in his car, he looks for any letter or goodbye that Yeondu might have left, and he finds one. But the doctor waits to read the words at home, which leave him devastated because Taekyung's biggest fear was being alone, and now, he is once again in that situation, only worse, as his heart is broken. Meanwhile, Madam Un called Chansik to talk. The lady, as much as she was terrible to Taekyung all her life, can't understand why In-ok is acting this way. She herself says that the woman went through the same thing as Yeondu and did not like it. Later, In-ok goes to the annex to see her son, and after she tells him that the protagonist only ran away to make him give up on her, Taekyung decides to move out of the Gong family residence and distance himself from everyone. The doctor spent the last 4 months looking for Yeondu and contacting everyone around her to see if he could find her. He bought an apartment and decorated the baby's room, leaving everything ready in case she returned one day. But by the 5th month, we can see that the man is losing hope. Switching to the protagonist, the day for Hanol to be born finally arrived, and Woo-hee was beside Yeondu during those hours. Missing her family, the protagonist contacted the only person she was sure would not tell the others that she was back in town, which was Dae-sang. And the man was delighted when he went to the hospital to meet the child. Meanwhile, Junha returned to Korea and intends to stay for a long time this time. After all, now with the birth of his baby, it will be easier for him to find the mother and child. In the next scene, we see Taekyung talking to Bang Nim, and in a way, out of frustration, she takes out her anger on her son-in-law. Bang Nim tells the man to stop waiting for her daughter, and knowing that he won't listen, she says that if Yeondu really loved him, she wouldn't have left. Of course, those words hurt Taekyung, who later at home, decides to put the apartment up for sale and gives up trying to find her. 7 months later, Ji Myung's baby has already been born, so Hyun-woo is going on maternity leave from the clinic, allowing his wife to continue working at the family company. Speaking of her, we see a visit from Sang-hoon, who went to Ji Myung to inform her that he will leave the company to start his own business. Mrs. Han from the pharmacy near the clinic is also moving to another city, so these two people who triggered the couple's relationship will no longer be around. As for In-ok, she arranged some blind dates for her son without his knowledge, which obviously irritated him and made Taekyung go to the Gong family house after a long time, only to tell his mother never to meddle in his life again. Switching to our protagonist, she is invited to be part of a study group, where she will be one of the teachers, and since she needs a better job, Yeondu considered accepting the offer. So, she went with the man looking for a place to hold the group to see what was available. However, it turns out that one of the places visited is Taekyung's apartment, and the man catches her by surprise in the baby's room he set up. The atmosphere is quite tense between the two, but no answers to their questions come up, and neither do they, so Yeondu soon leaves because Woo-hee ended up in the hospital after an accident. Woo-hee is fine, she just has to stay under observation for a few days. In the next scene, we meet Ji Myung's baby, who is adorable, and then, in a conversation between Chun Myung and Soo Jong, we discover that the couple gave up trying to have a child after being deceived by Woo-hee. The next day, confused by Yeondu's return, Taekyung had to see her once more because the protagonist forgot the baby's bag at his house. So the man takes it to the hospital where Yundu is caring for Woo-hee, and since babies aren't allowed in that area, Taekyung hears the nurse informing the protagonist. Despite the doctor's efforts not to care, he couldn't ignore the fact that Yundu had no one to leave the baby with, so Taekyung said he would take care of her, and since she had no options, the protagonist ended up accepting the help. Switching to a couple, I was curious to see if they were still together. We see that yes, Yoo Myung and Dongwook are still going strong, and the two enjoy their time with Soo Jaeum. The man even got the job he wanted, and to celebrate, Yoo Myung took the two for some watermelon juice, which is Soo Jaeum's favorite. Meanwhile, we see Soo Jong telling a story to the children's ward at the hospital, and after noticing a boy was very upset, she sat down to talk with him. His name is Hung Jun, and it turns out the child misses his mother, who doesn't visit him often. She doesn't stay as long as she promises during visits, and it's his grandmother who takes care of him daily. The boy goes to his room upset, and the person there to care for him is Yundu. This child is Woo-hee's son, and since the woman is bedridden, the protagonist is providing support for her. Hung Jun doesn't know that his mother is in the same hospital as him because Woo-hee didn't want to worry him. Soo Jong was intrigued because before leaving the hospital, she was sure she saw Yundu. Thus, at home, the woman mentioned the matter to Madam Moon, who seemed excited to learn that there might be a possibility the protagonist had returned to the city. But since the news spreads quickly in this family, In-ok soon finds out and, predictably, starts to panic just thinking that Taekyung might get back together with Yundu. Se-jin was also there when the lady spoke to In-ok, and since she intends to be with the doctor, even though Taekyung has made it clear he doesn't even want to see her, the woman feels her time is running out. Upset, Se-jin told Junha the news that Yundu might be back. Later, we see Jang Ho living alone in a small apartment, and his ex-wife visits him to see if she can convince him to return home. In the next scene, we see Junha seeking to learn about his rights as a father with a lawyer friend, but the best chance he has to be with his baby is to reconcile with the mother. Returning to the protagonist, we see that when she went to pick up Hanul at night, Taekyung and the woman finally sat down to talk about the past. Of course, Yundu shed some tears and apologized, while the man confessed that every day was torture for him without news of the two. Regardless, after the painful conversation, the protagonist spent the night there because Taekyung didn't want Hanul to wake up from her deep sleep. But the next day, this leads to an unexpected encounter with Madam Moon. As the lady thought Yundu might be back, she went to Taekyung to see how he was and to find out if the man had any contact with the protagonist, which resulted in Madam Moon meeting Yundu herself in her grandson's apartment. Of course, the lady didn't quite believe the story they told about how they met again, even though it was true. Nevertheless, Madam Moon offered Yundu a ride and fell in love with her baby. Before the protagonist got out of the vehicle, the lady demanded that she note her number down, because even though Madam Moon wouldn't admit it, she missed the woman. And to prove it, the lady tells Taekyung that she won't tell anyone about seeing Yundu at his place. However, Se-jin and Junha are looking for the protagonist, and even though they didn't find her at the hospital, the secretary found it suspicious when she saw Madam Moon's family car parked in front of the place. So at night, Se-jin questions Madam Moon about it, but when the lady denies it, the secretary realizes something must be going on. The next day, Madam Moon shows her appreciation for Yundu's return in other ways, like buying various expensive meats for her and demanding that the protagonist provide her address to receive them. Meanwhile, Woo-hee took advantage of being alone to call Taekyung to talk about Yundu. After all, in recent months, the woman saw her friends suffer a lot for leaving the doctor, but the man didn't even want to hear it and hung up quickly. Back to Se-jin, the woman was smart to visit the Gong family house, and when she saw that the lady ordered the family driver to make a secret delivery, the secretary pretended she left her car at home and needed a ride to get Yundu's address from the vehicle's GPS. In the next scene, we see that in the end, that call from Woo-hee resulted in something, as the man went to the hospital to see her, and the woman told him about what Yundu had gone through all this time missing him. Woo-hee comments that she's telling him all this because she hopes the two can be honest about their feelings, as it hasn't been easy for either of them. And at home, Yeon-do is very happy when she receives the food prepared by Madam Moon. But later, when she is returning from the market, the protagonist is surprised by Junha shouting in front of the residence. Before he could see her, Taekyung, who had received Madam Moon's address earlier, pulled her into his vehicle and drove off so the man wouldn't have a chance to find her. However, unfortunately, Junha managed to get an informant. He paid a neighbor of Yeon-do who told him her apartment number and left his number so the man could be informed when she returned home. In the next scene, we see Yoo-myung and Dong-wook arguing. Everything was going well between them until the man said he would never marry one of his old friends. Although it's something Yoo-myung also wants, she was upset to hear that Dong-wook would never consider going down that path with her. Meanwhile, at Taekyung's house, the man mends his relationship with the protagonist after giving her the chance to walk out of his life once again, but as Yeon-do chose to stay and not hurt him anymore, now our beloved couple is back together. Meanwhile, Junha went to Bang-nim's house because he thought that if the protagonist returned to the city, she would obviously keep in touch with her family. However, instead of getting more information about his baby, Junha ended up cornering Dae-sang, as Yeon-do's uncle accidentally revealed that he knew where she lived. As expected, Dong-wook and Bang-nim argued with him for keeping this secret. Later, Dae-sang called his niece and arranged for them to meet the next day at the hospital where Yeon-do's roommate was admitted, unaware that it was Woo-hee. The next day, Se-jin couldn't stop her obsession and even went so far as to threaten Madam Moon. Taking advantage of being alone with the lady, the secretary told her that if Madam Moon didn't give her Yeon-do's number, Se-jin would inform In-ok that the woman was back and, worse, that the lady was complicit. Meanwhile, Dae-sang went to meet his niece alone, as Bang-nim insisted on staying home. The man was surprised to discover that Yeon-do's roommate was his ex-girlfriend, and the atmosphere became even more tense considering how things ended between them. Of course, as the protagonist didn't know the romance's background, she didn't quite understand what was happening. Hanol was with Taekyung at the hospital reception, waiting for Yeon-do to finish her visit so they could leave together. However, before reuniting with his beloved, the doctor ran into Bang-nim. They went to the hospital cafe to talk, and from a distance, Junha saw them. But since Taekyung was with the baby, the man decided to wait. Summarizing the conversation between Bang-nim and the doctor, the woman did not accept her daughter's relationship with him and even said she would tell his family if he didn't break up with Yeon-do. However, this time Taekyung didn't back down and commented that the couple did not intend to separate, regardless of the pressure from both families. Later, Bang-nim also bumped into the protagonist and Dae-sang. The lady left without showing any positive reaction upon seeing her daughter, and outside the hospital, Dae-sang bluntly stated the truth. He said he didn't understand the fuss Bang-nim was making because Taekyung was a much better father than any effort from Junha. And as the conversation goes nowhere, Dae-sang soon leaves. Since Junha was in the parking lot at that moment, he saw the whole argument and, being the cunning person he is, invited Bang-nim for a coffee. At the cafe, Junha mentioned that he has a plan to separate Taekyung and Yeon-do, but for that, he needs Bang-nim's help. To prove his influence, Junha even mentioned knowing the doctor's parents, meaning he could inform them at any time about Taekyung being back with Yeon-do. Meanwhile, Dong-wook went to the cafe next to Yoo-myung's workplace to get her and her daughter's favorite drinks, hoping this gesture would make his beloved accept his apologies. And at the location, we viewers see that the owner hides when she sees him, suggesting that she might be the girl's mother. Switching to Se-jin, we see that she was tricked by her mother because when she arrived at the place arranged with the lady to have lunch, she found a man there for a blind date. Se-jin quickly dismissed him, and at home, she argued with her mother about the incident. However, the secretary was unaware that this idea came from In-ok, and when this secret was revealed, Se-jin became even more furious. The secretary went to In-ok, and as soon as she heard from the lady that she would never let her son marry Sejin, she decided to reveal that Taekyung is back with Yeondu. And now, my dears, Inoke's world began to crumble again. As soon as Sejin left, Inoke went to confront Madam Moon, making it clear that one of them should leave the family house because she wouldn't accept living under the same roof with her any longer after this act, which she considered a betrayal. Of course, this situation turned into the Gong family's new drama. However, what surprised me the most was a scene at the end of the episode where Yumayong and Dongwook discussed the recent happenings in their families. Despite the similarities, it never crosses their minds that Yeondu is the person they are both talking about. Continuing the discussion about the protagonist, the next day, Taekyung sends their home address to Bangnim, inviting her to visit and convincing her that the two are capable of starting a family together. However, I'm not sure if this was a very wise choice by the doctor. Soon after, the lady shows up with Dongwook at Taekyung's house, and they even hold Hanul, saying that no matter how much the protagonist doesn't want to go with them, they will take the baby and raise her. However, surprisingly, Yeondu stands up to her family and takes her baby back. She tells them that she was willing to raise Hanul alone and that it was her mother who wanted her to terminate the pregnancy. Now, after going through everything, Yeondu is determined to fight to the end for her daughter and her new family, regardless of what her mother thinks about it. This attitude prompts Bangnim to visit Inoke's house after seeing the couple, informing her that Taekyung is with her daughter again. The lady even suggested forming an alliance to separate them, but Inoke, filled with anger, dismisses Bangnim and sends her away. Meanwhile, the visits to the doctor's apartment don't stop, and now it's Junha's turn. To prevent Hanul from experiencing more stress, Yeondu decides to meet her ex-boyfriend at a cafe in the same building to talk and try once more to end things between them. But, as is often the case, this plan of the protagonist didn't work out. Junha makes it clear that he will do anything to take the woman and her daughter with him to the United States, even though Yeondu offered him the chance to see Hanul frequently. It seems Yeondu might not have fully considered what would happen during this conversation, given that Junha had often demonstrated being unreasonable. You remember that he once wanted her to terminate the pregnancy, right? As the protagonist returned to the apartment, Taekyung was receiving his mother, and Inoke was there just to tell him that she no longer considered him her son. Despite all this drama, good things also happened in this episode. After much whining about wanting to meet his cousin, Daesang took Sujayam and even convinced Dongwook to go along to Taekyung's apartment, which led to several cute moments with the protagonist's family and Hanul. Meanwhile, Sejin went to visit Junha after managing to transfer to the financial department of the Gong company. She is determined to destroy their legacy, but for that, she needs the man's help. The next day, more surprises arrive. Taekyung and Yeondu go to the Gong family house to talk with everyone, and in Madam Moon's room, for the first time, the lady expresses regret for all the times she mistreated Taekyung and Inoke just because they weren't blood relatives. She adds that she will support Inoke in whatever decision Taekyung's mother makes. However, Madam Moon just hopes that later Inoke won't regret it as well. The conversation seemed to be heading toward a happy ending when it was suddenly interrupted by Junha arriving at the residence wanting to give the family some news. Soon, the secret about him being Hanul's biological father comes to light, and of course, everyone is shocked. After everyone goes their separate ways, Madam Moon informs Bangnim about what happened, and the protagonist's mother starts feeling foolish for thinking Junha would help her with her daughter. Meanwhile, Daesang went to the hospital where Woohee was because she wanted to apologize to him for everything she caused in his life, and during the conversation, I concluded that their relationship is quite broken. I'm not sure if they will ever become a couple again. Woohee's son even came into the room towards the end of the conversation, and Daesang left the place quite shaken. In the next scene, we move to a scare that our main couple experienced. During the night, Taekyung noticed that Hanul had a fever, so he rushed to a friend who is a pediatrician to have her examined. While Yeondu was having some tests done with the little one, Taekyung received a call from Bang Nim, and shortly after the protagonist was leaving the consultation, she encountered her mother at the location. The lady seemed calmer. Now, let me add that this only happened because Jang Ho advised her to make amends with Yeondu, as he himself is estranged from his daughter, which eats away at him every day. However, we cannot say that In-ok had the same change of heart, because the next day she took Yeondu and the baby from the apartment and brought them to Junha's residence. In-ok tried to force the protagonist to hand Ha-nol over to her biological father, which obviously didn't work and led Yeondu to finally stop apologizing to the lady and start standing up to her. The protagonist made it clear that while In-ok can treat her however she likes, Ha-nol will no longer go through unnecessary stress. In-ok was also straightforward, stating that if she needs to destroy Yeondu to keep her away from her son, she will go to that extreme. Meanwhile, Junha made sure to tell Taekyung what happened, so later the doctor went to confront his mother, making it clear that from now on, they should live their lives separately. Madam Moon is one of the people who can no longer bear the family drama, so at dinner, she and In-ok ended up arguing at the table. Later, the lady even tried to pack a suitcase to leave the residence, but her son and grandson stopped her. Madam Moon made it very clear to In-ok that despite her own past actions, at least she redeemed herself while she was alive and never went to the extreme of trying to separate a mother from her baby. However, the next day, Madam Moon left very early, taking advantage of the fact that everyone was still asleep, and went to Taekyung's house with her suitcase. Madam Moon intended to hide from the people living in her house, but later, Hyun-woo and Soo-jong showed up at Taekyung's apartment unannounced and ended up encountering the lady there. Despite all the drama happening, the two were delighted to see Yeondu again and to know that the lady was in a safe place, not to mention the best part, seeing the two family babies together. Later, we switched to Dong-wook outside his girlfriend's workplace, waiting for her when he spotted the cafe owner leaving the establishment next door. Dong-wook became curious and wondered if she was a certain Soo-ji, but as Yoo Myung arrived shortly after and he was being cautious to avoid another argument with his girlfriend, he didn't mention it to her. As soon as he gets home, Dong-wook takes out a photograph from when he was still with his daughter's mother, and our doubts, at least I think, can now be put to rest, as everything indicates that the woman is Soo-jayam's mother. The next day, Soo-jong convinced her husband to go with her to Taekyung's house, and before the three of them took Madam Moon home, Hyun-woo took some family photos with Ha-nol to celebrate her early days of life. However, the pleasant situation quickly unravels when Ji Myung shows up at the location with In-ok. The woman decided to go to Taekyung's apartment after becoming suspicious of her husband's mysterious outings. And, of course, In-ok creates more drama, acting as if everyone is enjoying her misery, when the reality is much calmer than she suggests. Now back at the Gong family home, the discussions continue. Chun Myung voices the feelings that everyone shares but hadn't expressed to In-ok, which is that everyone has had to be careful about how they acted to prevent the woman from having an outburst during the whole year Yeondu was away, and they can't stand this situation anymore. Well, despite it being true, In-ok decides to express her own feelings as well. After all, she's been in the position of staying silent and tolerating insults from her stepchildren for 15 years, so what is 1 year compared to all that time? In any case, by the end of this disastrous conversation, the woman decides to leave the family home and moves with her belongings to another place, the Gong's summer house. Meanwhile, Yoo Myung was at the cafe next to her company with Soo-jayam, and since she urgently needed to go to the bathroom, she asked the owner of the cafe to quickly watch over the little girl. However, during this time, Dong-wook arrived at the cafe, and since we know that the woman is Soo-jayam's biological mother, he was not pleased to see their interaction, especially since he had had to take care of the child all this time without any help. Nevertheless, Dong-wook kept himself in check so his daughter wouldn't suspect that the woman was her mother, and he merely took her out of the cafe. Soon after, Yoo Myung returned to take Soo-jayam to the office, and the man went back to the cafe to retrieve the drinks that were left behind. Of course, the man took the opportunity to speak with the woman and made it very clear that she is not to come near Sujayam, as Dongwook had told his daughter her mother had already passed away. Later, everyone belonging to the Gong family gathers to discuss the crisis they are experiencing among themselves. Even the protagonist and Taekyung are involved in this discussion. Expecting Chonsik to come up with a solution, everyone in the room is surprised when the man announces that he will move away with his wife. Although Madam Moon makes a scene about this, Chonsik stands firm in his decision this time. The next day, as the main couple felt guilty about all this chaos, Yeondu decided to make a surprise visit to Inok's new home and, using the baby as an excuse, she managed to get into the residence. However, as expected, Inok was quite harsh from the beginning of the protagonist's visit. In the next scene, we see Sejin calling Bangnim. A few days ago, the woman saw her father and the lady together, so, as the secretary of the Gong family believes everything revolves around her, she asked Bangnim not even to dream of having a relationship with Jang Ho, because Sejin won't let her pursue it further. Meanwhile, we move to Chonsik making a surprise visit to the doctor's office. The gentleman is there to apologize to Taekyung for all the times he turned a blind eye and let his family mistreat both his son and Inok. And now that Taekyung is also dealing with a situation similar to Chonsik's, the doctor explains that it's okay because he now understands some of the actions his father took back then. Later, at Yeondu's request, the rest of the Gong family also went to the summer house and, despite catching Inok mistreating the protagonist, they all proceeded with their reason for being there, which was to apologize for all the hard times they put the woman through over the years. And while peace was being made, Yeondu quietly slipped away to head home. Now that some conflicts were resolved, Inok returned home and answered her son's calls. During the night, the lady reflected on everything Yeondu went through. So the next day, she decided to go to the protagonist's family home to apologize to everyone. Meanwhile, Madam Moon was heading up to Taekyung's apartment when Junha arrived, and, angry because he was one of the biggest problems for her grandson, the lady started hitting him with her cane. I have to admit I loved that scene. Madam Moon went to the doctor's residence to apologize to him, as well as to Taekyung's mother. Without knowing if he could forgive her, the man simply asked her to make amends for all the wrongs by being a good person to Hanol. And aware of the pain the lady feels over having had her first daughter taken from her, Taekyung promised to help her find the woman. In the next scene, we see the protagonist with Woo Hee, who is finally being discharged from the hospital. Taking advantage of things working out for Yeondu, Woo Hee decided to reveal her secret, which was that the protagonist's uncle was her boyfriend and the man she deceived. Despite feeling for Dae-sang, Woo Hee was very kind to Yeondu, so their friendship remained unchanged. Moving on to Sujayam, as her father told her not to return to that cafe, and the girl was craving watermelon juice, she decided to call the place and ask the owner for the recipe. The woman promptly sent everything to Sujayam via messages. At that moment, the girl noticed that the username was very similar to someone who commented on all her photos. Later, we see another very nice scene, where both families decided to surprise the main couple by hosting a celebratory dinner at Bangnim's restaurant. And the following day, the lovebirds finally registered their marriage. However, upon learning about this, Junha decided to register Hanol's paternity at the registry, as all he needed were the mother's details, making it quite simple to do. Afterwards, Junha went after Bangnim to take his daughter, as she was caring for the child so the couple could celebrate the marriage registration. As soon as Bangnim left Jang Ho's office, where she shared the conversation she had with Sejin and that she wanted to quit school, Junha showed up. The man was about to snatch the baby from Bangnim's arms when her classmates and Madam Un began attacking him. In the end, everyone ended up at the police station, and the couple also had to go there, as Hanol was in the middle of all this chaos. To prevent the dispute from dragging on, the protagonist decided to go with Junha and test his paternity, as the man only pursued this situation not out of love for her or the baby, but because his pride was wounded. Obviously, Junha couldn't even change a diaper properly, so after a while, Yeondu left his apartment, making it clear that before he wanted to have contact with the child, he needed to prepare to be a father since he desired it so much. Later, Taekyung went with Yeondu to the Gong family home. During their visit, he received a call from the missing persons department. It turns out that the search conducted by the doctor and Madam Moon was fruitful, but unfortunately, Strawberry passed away 20 years ago, which left the lady devastated. In the next scene, Dong-wook is deep in thought, and Yoo Myung, noticing this, questions her boyfriend. The man tries to change the subject several times, but as the conversation progresses, they end up talking about Soo-jaeom's mother. When Yoo Myung asks if he has seen her recently, Dong-wook lies and says no. The next day, the Gong family realizes the issue with Junha is far from over when they receive a court summons regarding a request for sole custody. But now that they know the man's nature, some memories resurface, such as all the times Junha provoked Taekyung for no reason or when Ji Myung saw him causing a scene in the company hall to see Se-jin. It doesn't take long for the family to realize that the secretary was also involved in the man's plans. Meanwhile, Yeondu decided to arrange a meeting with Jang Ho after discovering why her mother quit school. And it was during this conversation that our protagonist learned everything. The first shock was realizing it was Jang Ho who saved her that time a scooter almost hit her and not Se-jin. But the worst discovery was that Junha is the secretary's ex-boyfriend. When Jang Ho remembered it was the man who pushed him at the wedding, he just wanted to warn Yeondu that Junha was dangerous. However, Jang Ho ended up revealing much more than that, and the protagonist finally discovered who Junha's mistress was back when they were together. Yeondu didn't even have time to process all the information because the president soon called her and Taekyung to his office, where the doctor's siblings were also present, along with Se-jin and Junha. Chansik was already out of patience and immediately started questioning the two culprits, whose expressions alone were a dead giveaway. But as Junha also didn't hold back, the elder got heated and even slapped the man's face. In the end, the pair was escorted out of the company by security. In the next scene, Daesang made Woo-hee apologize to Chun Myung and Soo-jong for having deceived them before, which was the man's last request before the two parted ways forever. Meanwhile, Madam Moon went to meet her granddaughter alongside Taekyung and Yeondu. After learning that her grandmother was looking for her mother, the woman requested to meet the lady, and for Madam Moon, whose heart had been filled with sadness in recent days, this meeting was gratifying. Later, she finally told the family about her other daughter. Meanwhile, Yoo Myung called Dong-wook to her father's company to teach him how to play golf, and only then did they both realize they were related, which came as a shock to them. But not more than to Soo-jaeom, who at home, was rummaging through her father's things when she found a photo of Dong-wook with a woman and realized that the cafe owner is her mother. And dear viewers, the twists don't stop there. We quickly move to Junha, irritated, going to meet someone who constantly calls him. Seeing him on the way, Se-jin decided to follow him, which did not please the man when he saw her. But the biggest surprise was for us viewers because the person the man went to meet is his sister, who is also Madam Moon's granddaughter, meaning Junha is also the lady's grandson and Taekyung's cousin. Se-jin and Madam Moon's granddaughter ended up staying at the cafe to chat while Junha left. As the woman wanted to keep in touch with a friend of her brother, she asked Se-jin to write down her number on her phone. At that exact moment, Taekyung was calling his possible cousin, and Se-jin became curious, wanting to know what was happening. Thus, Se-jin was very accommodating and even later took Junha's sister to the man's apartment. There, when the siblings were alone, the woman mentioned meeting their grandmother. However, since Junha is proud, he didn't want to know who the person was, fearing someone might want to take his money. In the next scene, we see Soo-jaeom go to the cafe to confront her biological mother. Even though she tried to keep this a secret, the woman could only cry and ask the girl to forgive her for the lost time. Meanwhile, Madam Moon agreed to take a DNA test with her newly discovered granddaughter, just to guard against any fraud. But even if the result was negative, the family made the most of the time of uncertainty by welcoming her into their residence. While this emotional encounter was happening, Se-jin and Junha discovered that he and his sister were supposed heirs of Madam Moon, through their deceased mother, and of course, the man was as surprised as Se-jin by this news. When Madam Moon learns that she might have another grandson, she becomes excited and asks the woman to call her brother to the residence. Later, the DNA test results arrive for Taekyung, and now they officially have a new cousin. With this joy comes a misfortune named Junha. As always, he brought sadness to the family home when he caused another commotion, just to claim that he is also Madam Moon's grandson. Obviously, the lady falls ill after the revelation, which causes her new grandchildren to leave quickly, and to avoid reprimand from his sister, Junha lies to her about his history with the family. Now, after Se-jin learns about everything, we already knew that her greatest dream was to join this family. So, having Junha in the palm of her hand, the woman sees a great opportunity to achieve her goal. The next day, Madam Moon woke up a bit calmer and decided she would go to her first daughter's grave to finally see what her face looked like. However, at the site, she ends up running into Junha, who had also decided to visit his mother. After Madam Moon cries in front of her daughter's resting place, a daughter whose face she never even knew, she then sits with Junha to give the man a chance. Speaking of what I think, I believe the man will take advantage of Madam Moon's vulnerability to get closer to her, using the excuse of his mother's death. Later, we see a meeting between Junha and Se-jin, and during their conversation, it's clear that my suspicions were correct. The man is trying to get close to Madam Moon by exploiting her vulnerability. Therefore, the next day, Junha picked up the lady at home to have a conversation with her, shortly after Chansik had met with him. It turns out that the head of the family told the man to choose between two options, being Madam Moon's grandson or being Hanul's father. Using this conversation as high drama, he brings the matter to the already pressured lady, as supporting Junha means opposing Taekyung and Yeondu, two people who have greatly helped her and whom Madam Moon doesn't want to disappoint. On the other hand, Junha is the son of her daughter, who was taken from her. I understand this is quite a complicated situation. However, when the pair reaches the lady's destination, we see Madam Moon bid him farewell as if she were never to see him again, implying that she chose to side with Taekyung and Yeondu. Since we mentioned the doctor's name, in the next scene, he visits Junha's apartment to talk with him. From the first moment, Junha kept telling Taekyung to give up on being with the protagonist and Hanul because now Madam Moon will side with him after discovering he is her biological grandson. Well, Taekyung didn't lower his head, nor was he the one who started getting aggressive. He merely responded to Junha that he would never leave the great loves of his life and that if Junha was getting agitated, it was because he was afraid of losing, something the main couple knows won't happen. Moving on to Sujayam, Yumayong asked the cafe owner to deliver watermelon juice to the company during the girls' recording breaks. This was the first time the two had met since Sujayam discovered the woman was her mother. Thus, to prevent Yumayong from suspecting, the girl soon pretended she needed to go to the bathroom and went to the cafe to question why the woman was pretending in front of others not to know her, especially after having apologized. Meanwhile, Yumayong realized that Sujayam was not in the bathroom, and when she went out to the street to look for her, she ended up meeting Dongwook. Suspecting where his daughter might be, he asked Yumayong to wait for him at the company. However, Yumayong did not go up, and when she saw Dongwook merely taking Sujayam out of the place looking upset, she realized something strange was happening. Later, Taekyung could no longer wait for an answer and decided to go talk to his grandmother, who has been ignoring him. However, the doctor is surprised when he finds her in tears, apologizing to him, saying she doesn't want to have to choose between her grandsons, but she also understands why no one wants Junha in the family. After this situation, when Taekyung returns home, he doesn't even mention the conversation he had with his grandmother to Yeondu, because he doesn't want to worry her. Meanwhile, Jang Ho returned to his ex-wife's house, aware of what's happening in the Gong family home. The man wants to be close to his daughter to ensure she's not involved in a plan with Junha to hurt more people. The next day, Taekyung decided to put an end to this drama. When he arrives at the Gong family house, he finds his grandmother announcing that from that moment, everyone will have to live with Junha, in respect to the memory of her deceased daughter. It's at this moment that the doctor declares he will no longer be part of this family, thereby removing his name from the family registry, as Junha's is being added. Of course, now everyone sides with Taekyung, except Madam Moon, who remains conflicted, and Junha, who is benefiting from the situation. Yeondu did not know that her husband was going to make this decision, and when she found out, it was through a call from Junha. Thus, she realized that the only way to resolve this was to go directly to the source of the problem. So, at her ex's apartment, she begged him to leave them alone, and afterwards, she went to sleep at her mother's house. Not having the protagonist at home allowed Madam Moon to have a private conversation with her grandson in the apartment later. After asking the doctor to remain in her family along with Junha, Taekyung explained that he isn't acting out of spite, but rather because he understands that the lady owes her new grandson the best possible experiences. However, with him and Yeondu around, none of that would happen, not to mention that neither party would feel comfortable. In the next scene, we move to Dongwook talking with his ex. The woman asked to see Soojaeum once more and became emotional as she recalled the last meetings she had with the girl. At that moment, Dongwook handed her a handkerchief, and Yumayong entered the cafe, puzzled by what she was witnessing. Returning to the protagonist, in the evening she went to the Gong family house, even though she hadn't been invited to the memorial for Marengo. There, when given the chance to pay her respects, Yeondu introduced Hanul as Taekyung's daughter, not Junha's, and asked for the deceased's blessing to raise her in good health. Junha and Madam Moon were surprised by the protagonist's audacity, but it was the only way to stop the lady from ignoring her and Taekyung, for up until then, not even their calls were being answered by Madam Moon. Later that night, Junha asked his grandmother to support him in the fight for Hanul's custody. In the next scene, we see that the DNA test result for Madam Moon, combined with Junha's, has arrived. However, the man was shocked when he read that it was not compatible with his grandmother, and now, more secrets will come to light in this final stretch of the season. Meanwhile, Dongwook was ending his relationship with Yumayong, stating that this moment is very important for him to dedicate himself entirely to his daughter, as the little girl must be confused with having her mother back in her life. Although both like each other, Yumayong doesn't have much choice in this matter. At the Gong family home, Inoke feels distressed when she thinks about her son. She knows that for Taekyung to have decided to leave the family, even after receiving an apology from Madam Moon for all the suffering she caused over the years, wasn't easy. So, in agreement with Chon-sik, the couple concluded that the best thing would be to honor Taekyung's choice. The next day, we continue at the Gong family home, but now we see EKA talking with Madam Moon, and finally, the nun learned a little about her brother's confusion involving Hanul. Thus, to avoid being misled again by Junha, EKA went to the protagonist, and already at the apartment, Yeondu shared the story of her daughter and the battle she is fighting against the child's father. This conversation was quite important because later, when she was back at her church, EKA received a visit from her brother, and since the woman also learned about Taekyung's desire, she decided to give Junha some advice. EKA is someone who lost her mother young, just like Junha, so along with the truth about him being adopted by his parents when he was a baby, she asks him to leave the Gong family in peace regarding the custody issue of Hanul. The man has already brought a lot of suffering to them, and EKA believes that his mother wouldn't want this for Madam Moon. Obviously, Junha felt offended by Aka's request. He just asks her to keep the secret of them not being biological siblings a bit longer because before the family learns the truth, Junha wants to secure custody of his daughter. And thinking he has little time before everyone knows, Junha wastes no more time and doesn't let his trust in EKA be the only thing he has left. The man goes straight to Chansik to make an offer to the family head. Junha says that if Chansik gives him custody of Hanul, he won't join the family and will leave them in peace, but we know this choice doesn't belong to the gentleman, and even if it did, Chansik would refuse 1,000 times. Junha's ideas are exhausted, and he no longer knows what to do, so he goes to Sejin to see if he can get some help. However, he is surprised when she tells him that she is tired of the Gong family and has decided to study abroad. Meanwhile, Sujong continued her volunteer work at the hospital and, having taken an interest in Woohee's son, even without knowing who the boy's mother was, she just wants to help him. To ease the financial burden on the family, Sujong anonymously paid all the hospital bills. However, that same afternoon, she bumped into the boy and was surprised to discover that Woohee is his mother. Later, the two sit down to talk, and once Sujong starts venting, she doesn't stop. She makes it clear to Woohee that if she had a son like Hungjun, she would never have made him cry as Woohee has over the years, and warns her that the boy himself has said he would like to be adopted. In the next scene, we transition to Taekyung informing his mother-in-law and her brother about leaving the Gong family's registry. Since Bongnim is very fond of the doctor and knows he wouldn't harm her daughter, learning that both are once again going through a difficult situation, she becomes extremely stressed and starts pondering a way to help them. Taekyung was drinking at the family restaurant with Daesang and later went to Madam Eun's house, where, inebriated, he told everyone he loved them and that he wanted to sleep next to his grandma that night. Seeing the doctor in such a state for the first time affected Madam Eun deeply. The next day, we start by seeing Sejin quickly visiting her mother's apartment to pick up her passport and begin a new phase of her life. However, Sejin and Jang Ho end up arguing, as he wants to know where his only daughter is moving to, and due to her bluntness, Jang Ho, who is having heart issues, starts having an attack, leading to him being rushed to the hospital. Although Sejin is a very strong woman, seeing her father in a life-threatening situation shook her. Meanwhile, Madam Eun was at Junha's apartment, where she asked him to give up on Hanul. The lady explains that she can't and doesn't want to have to choose between him and Taekyung. However, at the same time, EKA was at the Gong family's house talking about her brother having been adopted and fears that the man, blinded by revenge, may do further harm to the family, so she hopes that with the truth, everything will be resolved. EKA made it clear that Junha discovered the adoption recently, but soon after, Chansik called his mother and revealed it to her, which caused her to feel unwell at Junha's house. Thus, Chansik went with his two sons to the man's apartment and brought his mother home. As soon as she arrived, she cleared things up with EKA, and although it seemed that Junha had plotted another scheme, this time he truly didn't know. In the next scene, we see Woohee with her son, and at that moment, my dislike for this woman grew even more. Instead of talking to the child and trying to understand why he prefers someone else as his mother, she simply told Hungjun to go after Sujong since he prefers her. Since Daesang was nearby and knows the whole situation, as his beloved told him, as soon as Woohee leaves the room, he decides to talk to the boy to help the family, and it's at this moment that the two start to get closer. Then Daesang also tells Woohee some truths, and I loved it. He told her to be strong and stop crying because, after all, Woohee is the adult in the situation and should act accordingly. The next day, even though she is still shaken by the situation, Madam Eun arranged a meeting with Junha, Taekyung, and Yeondu. She wants to resolve the conflict once and for all. Thus, Madam Eun asked Junha to let Taekyung adopt the baby, as he wanted her only out of pride, and today, the lady understands this. Since Junha is still her grandson, Madam Eun wants to teach him to be a good person and also makes it clear that, like him, Taekyung is also her grandson, so if Junha continues with this fight, Madam Eun will no longer see him. Returning to Jang Ho, fortunately everything went well in the procedure he had to undergo, and despite being a big scare, perhaps this situation will be good for Sejin to make peace with her father, as she was quite worried. The next day, now that everything is better in the Gong family, Taekyung and the protagonist decided to prepare a lunch for everyone in their apartment. However, Yumayong and Dongwook have not seen each other since the day they broke up. And since the two were the first to arrive, it was awkward when they were introduced to each other. Yumayong was ready to talk about their relationship, but as Dongwook pretended not to know her, she just went along with the act and became annoyed. During the party, Junha appeared, bringing good news with him. After drinking a lot the previous night, Junha decided to give up custody of Hanul and plans to leave Korea, but first, he only wants to spend a few hours with his daughter, and now it's up to the main couple whether or not to allow it. Meanwhile, Soo-jaeum was spending time with her mother, having decided to give her a chance, and the girls' day was very nice. Soo-jaeum had fun and realized they are very similar. However, when she was returning to her father, Soo-jaeum ended up seeing him and Yumayong arguing. Dongwook said he didn't like Yumayong, and now that he was honest, the two could finally move on with their lives in peace, without excuses as he had been making before. In the next scene, we see Sejin and Junha talking about their new plans, and since they are going to the same country, they decide to go together. Despite Jang Ho being quite ill, Sejin comments that it would be insincere to make peace with him now since they don't have a typical father-daughter relationship. The next day, we see that the main couple agreed to Junha's request to spend the day with Hanul, and the man really made an effort to take care of her. However, chaos ensued when Junha was supposed to return the baby to the parents, and he didn't show up, leaving the whole family worried about what he might have done this time. EKA called Sejin to ask for her help, as at this point in life, she is the closest person to her brother, and as soon as Sejin returns, we find out that he is in a temple that Sejin had introduced to him as his place of refuge. However, as soon as Taekyung arrives at the temple, Junha had already left the place with Hanul. At this moment, the family is completely desperate and only calms down when Yeondu calls to inform them that the man has arrived at the Gong family's house. Poor Hanul was already exhausted from crying so much and even had a fever. Junha knew that what he did was very serious, so the protagonist simply took her baby back and sent him away. Despite all the scare, the couple was extremely grateful to the family that helped them search for Junha in every corner they could. The next day, now that peace seems to have returned to the Gong family, Madam Moon had a great idea to update the photo that hangs in the living room, where everyone should belong with their children, and I believe this shows us more than anything how much the lady has evolved as a person. Another person who undeniably improved her behavior is Sejin. To demonstrate that she acknowledges this, Madam Moon arranged a meeting with the woman after seeing her father in the hospital. During this meeting, the lady apologized to Sejin for everything she made her do and also heard the woman apologize for the things she did to Yeondu and Taekyung. Chansik took the opportunity to ask Sejin to wait for Jang Ho to get better before going to study abroad, because even though the two don't understand each other, the woman's father cares about her a lot. However, Sejin does the opposite of the advice she received and doesn't wait for her father to leave the hospital before traveling. Meanwhile, Junha asked to meet with Yeondu and Taekyung. The man met with them to say that he will authorize the doctor to adopt Hanul, because the previous day, after everything he caused for his own daughter, Junha realized that he is not ready to be a father. Later, when Madam Moon found out, she felt proud of him for making this decision, so she went to meet with Junha to talk to him and revealed that she would keep him as her grandson, because she now understands that blood doesn't define family. In the next scene, we see the Gong family gathered for the photo I mentioned, and at that moment, Yeondu took the opportunity to say that the couple and Hanul are moving back to the annex, which made everyone very happy. Then, moving to the day of the move, we see that those helping the couple are Dongwook and Bangnim. As they begin to set up things in the annex, the man accidentally bumps into Yumayong. In fact, the breakup has not been easy for Dongwook, and because he decided to choose to be with his beloved, soon the man enters the Gong family house ready to reveal their relationship, but Yumayong stops him, and later on, we see the two talking. The couple finally made peace, and now Dongwook just needs to prove his love to Yoo Myung, and once that's done, they can be together again. Meanwhile, Hongjoon's health condition worsened and he can only continue receiving his treatment because Soo-jong paid the hospital expenses. Despite all the apprehension the woman feels for the boy's mother, Soo-jong decided to put that feeling aside and told Woo-hee that she could count on her if she needed help with Hongjoon's condition. Returning to Sae-jin, the day of her departure arrived, but before the woman boarded, her father went to meet her and after handing her an envelope full of money, he collapsed, indicating his health had worsened, and now, I believe that Sae-jin finally realized how much harm she was causing her father. She then returns to the hospital with Jang Ho. After a long night, the doctor comes to deliver the news that the man will be fine, and as soon as he wakes up, father and daughter reconcile. But the most surprising to me was the next day when the main couple visited Jang Ho in the hospital and Sae-jin apologized to them for everything she had caused. In the next scene, we turn to Soo-jaeum with her mother, who are getting closer and closer, leading the girl to call her mom, and of course, the woman was moved. In the following days, Taekyung and Yeondu decided to celebrate their wedding with a party, just as they would have done at the beginning, if everything had gone differently, and it was a beautiful moment among family and friends. Now, opening the part for my comments, in dramas they always get weddings right, don't they? I found this dress beautiful, the first time they got the protagonist's look right, and she looks absolutely stunning. After a year, we see that Sae-jin's relationship with her parents has significantly improved, and now, after Jang Ho's health has stabilized, she has finally started her studies abroad. As for the protagonist, she is teaching her classes again as the #1 teacher at the academy that had expelled her as soon as they found out about her pregnancy, back at the start of the episodes. Junha returned to Korea so that Taekyung could begin the adoption papers for Hanul, and it seems that the man is more responsible now. Hanul has become a beautiful, healthy baby and is loved by her family. Meanwhile, Bangnim opened a branch of his restaurant, which was a success. And Hongjoon was cured of his illness, so now he can enjoy his time with his mother and Soo-jong as much as he wants. It's worth noting that Woo-hee named the woman and Chun Myung as his son's godparents. Now, to conclude with a flourish, we see the main couple finally able to enjoy life in peace with their little Hanul. What did you think of this season? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments, and subscribe. If you liked the video, please like and share it to support me. Until next time.